across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Now he's sweating. That is the front page of The Sun today. Prince Andrew, former Prince Andrew, now Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, who said he couldn't sweat in that famous Newsnight interview. Well, he's the first royal to be held since Charles I in 1647. These are dramatic developments for the royal family. I want your views on all of it. We're also talking today about Iran and the UK blocking Trump from using RAF bases if there are strikes on Iran. Obviously, we're a lot closer to Iran than America is. Also, the new cabinet secretary, this is the chief civil servant in the whole country. She made staff join a non-binary book club and said they should, one particular member of staff should spend 20% of their time on diversity activities. What about actually running the country and implementing what the democratically elected government wants to do? Maybe that should be part of it. We'll talk about all of that. There's loads to talk about this morning. There's so many different implications for the Andrew story as well, for our country, for Peter Mandelson as well. He has not been arrested so far. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens fairly soon. And what is misconduct in public office? Of course, it's not related to Virginia Giuffre or any of the other allegations against Andrew, which he denies. We'll get into all of that. I want to hear your views on all of it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note 0344 499 1000. Keep them to less than a minute, please. We'll play out as many of those as we can between now and 1 o'clock. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on that main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Big news in the UK and around the world today. I was on Australian TV last night. They're interested too. Loads to discuss. Stay with us here on Talk. I should say that I will be with you tomorrow and Sunday between 10 and 1, and then next week I'm doing something slightly different. I'm going to be on Talk between 7 and 10, Monday to Thursday, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. in the evening slot, Monday to Thursday, so I hope you can join me for that. Right then, let's go live to Sandringham. Thomas Godfrey is a news reporter for the Sun newspaper. Thomas, dramatic developments in the last 24 hours. We know, of course, that Andrew is back at Sandringham. What's the latest?
Good morning, Peter. Yes, the dust is still settling on one of the most dramatic days in the history of the royal family yesterday, as Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was rushed away after a knock at the door from Thames Valley Police. This morning it is much quieter here on the Wood Farm estate, where Andrew is temporarily living before he moves to his new permanent home at Marsh Farm here in Norfolk. We've seen a few cars coming and going. An unmarked white van, potentially a delivery van, drove through the front gate here a short while ago. That's now left. A few staff out and about as well, and of course the presence of the police more generally. They're not searching this address. Those searches were concluded yesterday evening before Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor returned home from the police station. Obviously at Royal Lodge in Windsor this morning, police are back, continuing to look for any evidence that may aid what is now a full-blown criminal investigation.
This is really dramatic for the royal family. It's dramatic for the country as well. What happens now, Thomas? I mean, you've covered so many different crimes and investigations for the Sun, not involving a former prince, but given that he has been released under investigation, what does that actually mean? What happens next?
Well, let's be very clear. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor will not be given any special treatment by the police. They'll have a lot of time now, several weeks potentially, to work out with their partners at the Crown Prosecution Service whether they can lay any charges down or whether they need to investigate more. There is still the potential that Andrew is called in for a second interview, or that other police forces, who we know
Oh, I think we've just lost the connection to Thomas there, but I think what he was about to say is about those other police forces that are looking into this. And we know that Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister, has written to quite a number of police forces. I'll see if I can just see the list in front of me. I know that there are many police forces that have cover areas that are to do with airports, for example, and certainly, yes, here's the list. He has done he sent a letter, a 5-page memo. This is Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister, to the Metropolitan Police, Surrey, Sussex, Thames Valley, Norfolk and Bedfordshire constabularies, which of course cover Heathrow, Gatwick, Luton, RAF Marham and RAF Horsham, among other airports and air bases. So there are so many different elements to this. I think we're back with Thomas. Thomas, I've just been outlining Gordon Brown there sending this 5-page memo. Gordon Brown saying the memorandum provides new and additional information to that which I've submitted to the Met, Essex and Thames Valley police forces, where I expressed my concern that we secured justice for trafficked girls and women. Now, what Andrew was actually arrested for yesterday is not actually to do with the women, is it? It's to do with misconduct in public office, which by itself can be a very complex charge. He hasn't been charged yet, of course, but can be a very complex thing.
Yeah, we normally see misconduct in public office used for police officers who may be corrupt, or for prison officers, some very notable cases recently. It's quite a broad offence. It's a common law offence. There's no sort of statutory outline of what it actually is, but there are a few key components. Obviously, the police in this case, we know, before arresting Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, were liaising with specialist prosecutors in this field to establish if there was any basis on which he could be interviewed over this. This all relates, of course, to Andrew's decade as the UK's global trade envoy. He went around the world on behalf of the Foreign Office and the Business Department, liaising with foreign governments, trying to strike trade deals, trying to help promote Britain on the global stage. But there was criticism over his links to Epstein in that role, and the latest tranche of emails appears to show Andrew Mountbatten Windsor forwarding on reports from some of those trips. Now, he hasn't responded to those allegations yet. He has denied other wrongdoing in his relationship with Epstein. But this is a really, really complex offence. It could take quite a while to actually work out on what grounds he could be charged, if he's going to be charged. And of course, searches are still ongoing, and the police may well be looking for more evidence, other emails even potentially, from his Buckingham Palace email account, which we know he was using because it's listed in the files, to see if this could have happened potentially, allegedly, multiple times.
Very interesting to talk to you. We'll check in with you perhaps a bit later on. There's Thomas Godfrey there, news reporter at The Sun, down at Sandringham, near to where Andrew is now. Di Davies is a former head of Royal Protection. Di, thank you for joining me this morning. There are questions not just about Andrew, but also about who saw what, when. I just wonder, from a Royal Protection perspective, he had, of course, and still does, have Metropolitan Police officers who look after him as part of the Royalty and Specialist Protection Unit. And Thames Valley Police as well, looking after him too. I just wonder, Di, if an officer were to see something that they thought was a crime, what would they do about it, or what should they do about it?
Well, a very good morning, Peter.
Morning.
In respect of what a police officer do, should be exactly like anybody else. He should report it and or take action at the time. We've been talking about misconduct in office, and quite often that somewhat vague common law offence has often been used against police officers for failing or carrying out unlawful duties in their role as a public servant, prison officers. So there is no excuse if any police officer sees a crime being committed. He or she has to act. If they can't act immediately, then they should bring that to the attention of their managers and or leaders. And that's what should have happened in this case, should any police officer at any time in that period where, well, throughout his life until recently, they were with him. So questions, surely, common sense says they have to be interviewed.
The things that Andrew is being accused of are very, very serious. Of course, he denies all the allegations against him in regard to women. We know as well, women and girls, it should be said. But what he is being arrested for is misconduct in public office. I just wonder, if you're a Royal Protection officer and something reasonably minor happens, how much discretion do you have? I'm not saying anything Andrew did or didn't do was minor, but if you're looking after, let's say, for example, a royal princess who's 16 and someone hands her a glass of wine or invites her to the pub, what do you then do? That's illegal.
Well, yes, and there's precedent with that, with Harry and other juniors, and even Prince Charles, when he was in Gordonston, or King Charles as he won, that very issue that he went to a pub and they gave him a drink when he was underage. Common sense applies. And again, in today's, if somebody gave him a spiff or something like that, you would politely say, come on, you shouldn't do that. And arguably, I would say, you'd stamp on it or put it down the loo and give him a good bollocking. And in fairness, juvenile members of the royal family were given because quite often in those days the protection officer was much older, much wiser, and that's what would happen. But there is no excuse for any compliance or aiding and abetting any crime at all, and there is procedure to deal with it. And so questions must be asked, sadly, of all those years and all those officers who must...
So what's going to happen? I mean, we've talked about the minor stuff, we've talked about the major allegations. So will those police forces, perhaps Thames Valley Police, now be wanting to go through and talk to all of those royal and special protection officers who've looked after Andrew over the years? If they were in America with him and they turned a blind eye to things, surely those officers as well as Andrew would be subject to perhaps criminal investigation at some point.
Well, I think you're right. Whether it's Thames Valley or the Metropolitan Police themselves, who apparently are now investigating some aspects of what personal protection officers have known. And let's face it, we're going back. He's been protected all his life. Now, clearly, they would have to narrow that down to the periods in question and possibly before, slightly, and after. So there are so many questions, not only of police officers, but of those public servants that went with him, diplomats, staff, valets, butlers. I mean, the tentacles of this, I said earlier this morning, a Pandora's box. Well, that box is huge, and it needs coordination between now 10 forces, and somebody at the appropriate level will have to decide on a strategic plan and then action that plan into a variety of different actions. And that's going to be quite complex. And then, of course, throughout this, you will have specialist crime CPS lawyers advising, because so far it's misconduct in public office, which is enormously vague. And truth, no high-ranking official has ever in this country been prosecuted. There are so many loopholes in it, and it worries me that they ought to be looking at other aspects of the investigation, not relying on misconduct, in my opinion.
Certainly misconduct in public office, as you say, is one of those charges that, and he hasn't been charged yet, but that is one of those things that, as you say, can be vague. So they really should, in your opinion, look for other ways to perhaps charge him, you think. And of course, there are so many questions saying, well, look, if he was trade envoy and he was sending things to people that he shouldn't have been sending, what about all the other evidence, and there is lots of evidence in the public domain about his role with Epstein, about his role with young women, the allegations against Virginia Giuffre? There's been no criminal sanction to do with that, for example. Could that, presumably, that is another avenue that prosecutors and the police should be looking at?
Well, most certainly. You're absolutely right. And that's why I say the tentacles of this, including the Official Secrets Act, if that applies to very sensitive military information, which he would have been party to over the years. You know, he was going around all around the world talking about British arms sales, all manner of things. So he would have been given the top level, possibly secret information. Well, did he release that? These are part of the investigation. So this is only the start of a complex investigation into him. And don't forget his ex-wife and others who may have aided and abetted him, including private secretaries. I'm not going to name anybody, but they are in the public domain.
Yeah, there are a number of names of people who may have forwarded things on. Certainly very, very interesting, and the tentacles will go everywhere. Di, appreciate your contribution this morning. It's Di Davies there, who's a former head of Royal Protection. Lots of people getting in touch, including Glenn in Plymouth, who says, good morning, Peter. Why is the Mandelson side of this fallen off the side of a cliff? Believe me, we're going to talk about that this morning. And actually, there are allegations that Peter Mandelson was the person who put Andrew forward to be the trade envoy and said that he should do the job. Now, King Charles, or Prince Charles as he then was against that, thought that would be a very bad idea. And actually, I was chatting to another trade envoy, a former government minister, actually Paul Scully, last night, who was talking about how when Andrew was in Thailand, for example, he wouldn't just stay at the British Embassy there. Instead, he took an entire floor of the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. So to finish Glenn's message, he says, why is the Mandelson side of this fallen off the cliff? Surely he should also have been arrested. I suspect Starmer will be happy with the focus on Andrew, as it's completely taken the pressure off him and Mandelson. Glenn, I think the Mandelson thing is going to come round very, very soon. I wouldn't be surprised if he is arrested reasonably soon. What the police will do is they'll take their time to put a case together. It may not even be charged, but if there's going to be an arrest or an interview, well, certainly they've been looking at Mandelson. They've been searching his homes, both in both in London and outside London as well. Denny in Scotland says, picture of Andrew in the papers, doesn't seem to be wearing a seatbelt. Maybe add that to his arrest. Stephen Millings in Belfast said it would be unfair for Andrew to get a jury trial. Public opinion has been written in the hysterical media, so he's already guilty according to them. It's really unfair. You all really need to calm down. A grown man arrested for espionage does not warrant the hysteria you're all showing. Stephen, I respectfully disagree with you. This is the eighth in line to the throne here. This is the king's brother. It's the first time since 1647 that a royal has been arrested. It's news. Daniel is an Epsom and has some views on this. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Daniel, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hey, Peter, I've got a question for you. 2 days ago, Obama said on live television that alien and UAP exist.
I saw that.
It's a real phenomenon, right?
I saw that,
Then yesterday, Donald Trump accused him of releasing secrets and he shouldn't have done it, and basically admitted that what he'd said was true. And then this morning, Donald Trump has said, right, we're going to have full disclosure on this issue. It's a real phenomena. You can see the tweet, right?
Yep.
So we're on the verge of disclosure and the largest impact on human history. And you're talking about Prince Andrew. How on earth, with this in the balance, the biggest piece of information to probably ever come to light in human history, the biggest event in human history, and you guys are talking about Prince Andrew again?
Daniel, do you honestly think, hold on a second, do you honestly think we should have led the show this morning with there might be aliens?
No, but there isn't might anymore, though, is there? Because since the US Navy upgraded all of their latest
Daniel, I'm not saying that's not a story. But are you honestly saying that the story that's in the front page of newspapers and online globally, that the eighth in line to the throne has been arrested, we shouldn't be talking about it?
No, I think as a populace in newspapers and websites around the world, we should be talking about that we're finally getting disclosure on probably the most momentous issue in all of human history. But instead, we're talking about Randy Andy. I mean, for me, there's no comparison. But in successive days, 2 presidents have come out and said that the phenomena's real, okay? And they're also going to give full disclosure on the topic. And we're talking about Prince Andrew. I don't get it.
Okay, Daniel, well, I think we'll respectfully agree to disagree. I think Andrew probably is a story. Thank you to Anne in Yorkshire, who says, good morning, Peter. I was wondering if the ex-Prince Andrew could claim legal aid. I don't think so. I think he's got plenty of money, and I don't think that'll be an issue. Bogner Bob says, I think of the government machine doing a great job keeping the eyes off Mandelson. He is far more involved than that idiot Andrew. Well, we know that Peter Mandelson denies, lots of things that he is accused of as well. A non-binary book club. Surely the pages will fall out, says Mark. That is very good, Mark, very good. Yes, we're talking about the head of the civil service, Antonia Romeo. She has been appointed to the role, first woman in the role, if that matters to you, but certainly she has been accused of being a bit on the woke side. We will talk about that a little bit later on. We'll also talk about the UK blocking Trump from using RAF bases for strikes in Iran. and, well, lots on Iran, actually. We're going to talk to Colonel Simon Diggins about that as well. The NHS, Quango, managing to hold 117 diversity events in just over a year. Honestly, this nonsense continues. We will continue to talk about Andrew because it is a story, I'm afraid, like it or lump it. Lots to discuss with James Heal, and I want to make sure I get your views on the air, whatever they are, and I'm very happy to hear from Daniel. And yes, if there are aliens, fair enough, that's a story. Stay with us here on Talk.
We genuinely are on resignation watch. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Labour MPs, they say, listen, Keir, your position is untenable. This is all about appointing that rat, Peter Mandelson, who faces a criminal investigation.
Can Keir Starmer survive the Mandelson scandal? We have breaking news for you. We've just been talking about, of course, Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff. We've now had another resignation from number 10. And Keir Starmer's Director of Communications, Tim Allen, has now also resigned. The plot is thickening. The noose is tightening.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes in just a second. But I want to bring in James Heal now, the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. James, great to talk to you this morning.
Thank you, Peter.
Tell me how the government is reacting to the Andrew news. We had David Lammy, of course, in the Middle East. I think it was in Dubai or perhaps Saudi Arabia yesterday at a big AI conference. I think it was Saudi Arabia, sorry. And we have, of course, Starmer has been asked about this, but they're trying to keep well away from it, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Keir Starmer said many times that if there's grounds for a police investigation, then that should go ahead, of course. And I think right now they're just watching all this take up all the airwaves, and they want to keep their head out of it. They are trying to not sort of get involved, obviously, police investigation, and I think they're just happy to kind of keep it all at arm's length.
No doubt Mandelson, further allegations and perhaps even an arrest may happen. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens in the next couple of weeks. There have been searches there, of course, the police putting together the evidence at the moment, and that will bring things squarely back to the government, won't it, if that happens?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the allegations against Prince Andrew, reports in the newspapers today about potentially sort of handing over some of those documents which he had as trade envoy, you would think that given the allegations against Peter Mandelson, one can see a similar arrest happening in that case if there is sufficient evidence for it. At that point, of course, all those sort of questions will be re-emerged. And the other thing, of course, Peter, is that we come back from recess next week, Parliament does, and after that you'd expect to see the release of those so-called Mandelson files, all those documents between Mandelson and members of the government, which the Conservatives have been pushing for. So this will probably reignite the issue.
Certainly. I want to talk about the UK blocking Donald Trump from using RAF bases for strikes on Iran. Just tell me about this. It's a diplomatic and a military row as well. We're going to talk to Colonel Simon Diggins in a few minutes' time to go do a deep dive, but certainly from the political perspective, James, what are the issues here?
So I think there's two issues really, one of which is about sort of international law and the question of whether it's being applied. It's been obviously a very vexed issue for this Labour government in office and in opposition as well. The questions around Gaza, was Israel breaking international law there? And so I think there's an interesting question about whether, hang on a sec, if the UK is sort of defending international law by not letting the US use these bases potentially against Iran, does that mean that somehow we have an application of international law that the US doesn't? That's going to be one for the lawyers to thrash out. And the second thing is about the real politic of all of this, which is that I think that everyone is very wary in the Labour Party about potentially escalating the Iranian crisis. This seems to be the great thing that we're almost sleepwalking towards. Obviously, I know that Epstein and everything is taken out of the airwaves, but I think that there is a concern in government about how this could escalate. And so they're obviously very concerned, not just for legal reasons, but for sort of political and peacekeeping ones, not to do anything that might help Donald Trump escalate the cause of a war in Iran.
We'll get into that in more depth with Colonel Simon Diggins in just a few minutes' time. Let's talk about the new Cabinet Secretary, Antonia Romeo, making staff join a non-binary book club. As one of my texters very kindly pointed out, if it's a non-binary book club, surely the pages will fall apart.
That is a very good line, and someone knows their books clearly. Look, I think that Antonia Romeo was someone who has risen through Whitehall, and that's the pros and cons that come with it. She's the longest-serving permanent secretary in Whitehall, and there's a reason for that, is that she's gone along with the orthodoxies of the age. And I don't think it's a great surprise. You think about, for instance, 2018, when the Conservatives, people like Penny Mordaunt, were considering adopting self-ID and sort of pushing for that being discussed in Whitehall, that also the Cabinet Secretary now has was suggesting things about non-binary books, etc. So I think it's another example, perhaps, of how things that seemed like a great idea at the time and how it's all fashionable Whitehall orthodoxy actually end up sort of coming back to bite them.
It's very interesting. Antonia Romeo telling a civil servant to join a gender non-conforming book club as part of their performance review. The employee was told to spend up to 20% of their time fulfilling inclusivity goals, such as encouraging colleagues to display their preferred pronouns and recruiting non-binary staff. I mean, this was a day a week that she was meant to do. This was between 2017 and 2021, so you're right, when that sort of peak woke previously between 17 and 21, as you say. What sort of Cabinet Secretary do you think she's going to be?
I think that I would refer to the comment I got yesterday from one official who said that after she replaced the plodding Chris Wormold, that the hare had finally beaten the tortoise. And I think that she will be a fast-paced Cabinet Secretary, a lot of attention on her. I think she's going to grab a lot of headlines, and I can't yet see how it's going to end, but it's a marked contrast with what's come before her, and it's a marked contrast with our somewhat plodding Prime Minister too.
James, thank you. We will see what happens with Antonia Romeo, who is going to be the new Cabinet Secretary. She's in day 2, of course, big constitutional implications for her with Andrew as well. She has a role within that. James Heal, their Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. Lots more to talk about. We're going to talk to Colonel Simon Diggins in just a second, the Defence and Military Analyst, about the UK blocking Trump from using an RAF base for strikes in Iran, a 10-day ultimatum to Iran with warnings that bad things will happen without a nuclear deal. Never mind the 8th in line to the throne being arrested. We could be on the brink of war with Iran. But what could the UK's rule be? We'll talk to Simon Diggins in just a second. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk now about Iran, the US-Iran 10-day ultimatum. Colonel Simon Diggins is with us. He is a defence and military analyst, obviously a very senior officer in the UK military previously. Simon, good morning.
Peter, good morning to you. How are you?
What's going on here with Iran? Just tell us about this 10-day ultimatum, what Trump has said and what the implications could be, because it's pretty serious, and it is certainly, we know these threats have been made before. There are times when things occur at the end of these ultimatums. Sometimes things do, sometimes things don't. What's your analysis of it? And just tell us about it, Simon.
So what's happening is that Trump has now got a general build-up of American forces in the region. You'll recall during the height of the revolt, that there was a threat made by Trump that if forces used to suppress those who are rising up against the Ayatollah's regime, then that they would be with them. That somehow it implied that force would be used against the Iranian regime, and it didn't happen. And it didn't happen, I think, at the time because the forces were not in place, particularly the kind of defence forces required against what Iran's most likely response is going to be, which is to use their very large stock of ballistic missiles. They have over 3,000 ballistic missiles in their stock. They used some 500 last year, but they seem to have been replenished. And they also have continued on their program of nuclear warfare, of nuclear weapons development. Last October, the Ayatollah gave direction to the IRGC to develop what they call small, compact nuclear devices. So the danger and threat, I think has been recognised by Donald Trump, is that whatever damage was done to the Iranians last June, and there was damage done to the Iranian regime, that's now been passed by, and they are likely and heading towards developing nuclear weapons again. And so he's basically said to them, you've got to stop this, and we're going to put the forces in place, which they didn't have in place earlier on, to do something about it, and most importantly, to defend against the most likely response. And that, of course, also affects other people in the region. I mean, there have been people like the Qataris, the Saudis, and people like that saying this is all very well and proper, but it's quite likely the Iranian regime will lash out at us. What are you going to do to protect us as well? So I think that's where we stand at the moment.
Any sign of the Iranians listening, capitulating, or perhaps being defiant?
They are currently being defiant. They've declared this exercise in the Straits of Hormuz, which is effectively close the Straits of Hormuz. They say it's only temporary and it's not there to stop the regime, stop the Straits. But they're making a point, and the point they're making is that it's very easy for them to close the Straits. The Straits themselves are only some 35 kilometres wide, so it's not much wider than the English Channel. And they have missiles set up on the Iranian shore that can basically fire into what is actually Omani and Emirati territory there, but easily close the straits. They've also got swarms of these fast patrol boats. It's extraordinary. Some of them go up to 116 miles an hour. So really, really fast patrol boats with their missiles, and they attack in swarms, and they drop mines. Why is the Gulf of Hormuz important? Something about 1/5 of all of the world's oil flows through the Straits of Hormuz. And the last time they closed the Straits of Hormuz, which is in the 1980s, that was a significant effect on oil prices and therefore on the world economy.
There does need to be that sense of free movement on the Straits of Hormuz, absolutely. What do you think happens now, Simon?
I think the build-up continues. And my understanding from reading what's been come out in the open sources is that it could be as soon as tomorrow that the Americans are in position to conduct some kind of military operations. Donald Trump has talked about this happening within 10 days. So clearly he's still leaving a kind of window of opportunity for the Iranians to make some really positive move to do that. And the danger is that for Trump is that if he doesn't do something about it, if the Iranians don't respond properly, then his bluff will seem to be being called. And I think that will be a very, very difficult position for him to be in.
We'll get into the UK specifically in a second, perhaps, Simon. But what does the rest of the world do if America bombs Iran? Because, of course, we saw this over the summer in regard to Israel. But could this be greater, something very different?
I think it would be much more. The last summer, the Americans came in towards the end, so there'd been this this sort of build-up of tension between Israel and Iran. And the Israelis were trying to do their best to damage, if not destroy, the Iranian nuclear facilities. But there were facilities the Iranians had buried them so deep underground that only Americans with their specialist bunker buster weapons could do something about it. And that's what came in at the end to be used from there. This is more serious because since then we've had the Iranian People's Revolt, the uprising against the Iranian regime, which showed not only the degree of opposition to the Iranian regime, but also their viciousness. We don't know the figures that have been caused, but have been killed, but anything between 6,000 and 30,000 killed, many tens of thousands more injured, and no doubt a whole rack of kind of oppression ongoing at the moment. I think that has changed the dynamics, or at least it should have changed the dynamics for an awful lot of people. What should the rest of the world do? I think we should support the Americans bluntly.
Let's talk about the UK right now, and I should say there are, of course, many people here who are supporting the Iranian people, not the Iranian regime, but the Iranian people who are being oppressed in exactly the way that Simon says. There's a huge march and rally that is planned in central London on Sunday, and I know there are various other people right across the United Kingdom and beyond, many of our viewers and listeners who really care about the human rights and women's rights and men's rights too in Iran. It is an absolutely disgusting, awful regime which is oppressing its people, murdering its people, doing dreadful things. Simon, when it comes to the United Kingdom, why is there this row about the UK blocking Trump for using RAF bases for strikes on Iran? Because he would need permission to do that were he to use UK bases, wouldn't he?
Absolutely, and I fear we are where we are so often with this government, where there's a distinction between their rhetoric and their reality. The reality, and this is a government spokesman last night, and I'll just quote if you don't mind, Peter, he said, Iran must never be able to develop a nuclear weapon, and our priority is security in the region. As a government spokesman saying that. And here is, our closest ally, the Americans, basically offering to do something about it, and the UK, through an interpretation of international law, is blocking that. And that just simply is wrong. I mean, firstly, a bit about international law. I mean, Iran is very capable of hitting British bases as far to the west as Cyprus from Iran, and they've also got a number of other British bases. So our sovereign interests are involved in this fight, and I've got the slightest doubt that the Iranians, if they decide to lash out in response to Trump, will lash out in all directions, and therefore our sovereign interests would be involved. So I think the international law argument, it goes out of the window. I do not accept it for one moment. But even beyond that, there is a sheer politics and security. As you rightly said, this is an utterly awful repressive regime, killing and murdering its own people. It sponsored terrorism across the Middle East, led to the attacks on Israel on October the 7th, and also, let's not forget, was directly responsible for the deaths of many of the British soldiers who were killed in Iraq in 2004 through to 2009. This regime, frankly, fundamentally, is the enemy of the people of the world. And there's an old Latin tag which has that. It's a common enemy of the world and should be removed. And anything that anybody who is prepared to do something about it, we should be supporting. At the end of the day, it's not a matter of international law, it's a matter of political will. Mm-hmm. And really, frankly, giving you that quotation from a government spokesman, 3 words: money, mouth it. Put your money where your mouth is. Yes. And that's what I think we need to have.
Speaking of people putting their money where their mouth is, the Board of Peace that Donald Trump has assembled, lots of countries putting huge amounts of money into that, many more not putting money in at all and having observer status at that. Tell me what your thoughts are, particularly about Tony Blair praising Trump for seeing Gaza's potential. There was one American business leader I was reading about yesterday who said that the Gaza coastline could be £50 billion worth of money for investors there. But of course, it's a small matter of peace in the region to sort out first.
No, absolutely there is. I mean, I think the physical location is absolutely correct. I mean, in terms of, look at, for example, despite the troubles it's had, look the way a place like Lebanon were able to develop. Indeed, look how Israel was able to develop itself in terms of location, in terms of its basic, if you like, resources and its position in the world. I'm sure Gaza could have made us a wonderful, peaceful place for everyone to work in. But as you so rightly say, there is a small issue of security at the moment. I think we're so often with Donald Trump, there's a sort of germ of a good idea somewhere in the back of it. Very much obviously seen through the focus of his kind of real estate background and the way in which he looks at the world. But there's a sort of, a few steps that need to be got through before we got through. And at the moment, whilst the ceasefire appears to be holding, always the important second stage of it, i.e. how do we have a kind of peaceful, sustainable, peaceful future for the people of Gaza, upon which then a development like the real estate development could take place. That bit is currently missing. And I mean, Tony Blair has huge experience in the world. If he can bring some of that experience to try and negotiate that crucial second stage, I think his views should be welcomed. But there is this missing second stage at the moment.
Just before you go, Simon, tell us about banks blaming the Labour government for blocking defence lending. What's this about?
Well, unfortunately, it's a long-term issue. It's been running through the latter stage of the Tory government as well. As banks and lending requirements became closely linked to the so-called environmental and social goals, to some extent, defence spending went into the back burner, because every time you kind of put it through the ESG filter, it came up with a big red no. Beyond that, there's the issue that I think has been
ESG, of course, being environment, social and governance matters, this kind of framework that so many different businesses and organisations now use to see if things are ethical or not in the view of in the view of ESG, essentially.
Absolutely. It's a kind of self-referencing organisation, and there are consultancies who provide ESG consultancy and making a lot of money out of this. But the second issue I think that's also been raised is the issue of the way in which the MOD writes its contracts, because many of the banks are saying it's very difficult to provide money to support a defence contractor, because the contract information they're given by the MOD and indeed by the defence company is so opaque that things like risk management can't be analysed properly. So there are two issues that are running there, both of which are in the gift of the government to sort out. And the first one is actually a straightforward campaign to say, look, the highest priority of any country should be to defend itself. That should be the highest environmental, social and governmental role that we have a safe country that's secure. Therefore, you must lend against those criteria. But the second thing also is for the government to step in, sort out its contracts, and also be very clear that it will act effectively like as the backstop, the sort of insurer of last resort, in order to protect banks' liquid capitalisation, so they can lend against some of these documents that come forward. So I think in both instances, I say this has been slightly longer than the Labour Party as term in power, and it's been running now for a number of years. But it's absolutely in their gift to sort out. And indeed, they must do so if they're serious, and that is a question, if they're actually serious about developing our security and our defences.
Simon, thank you. That's Simon Diggins there, Defence and Military Analyst, Colonel Simon Diggins. What do you think about what he said there? 0344 499 1000. We're talking about Andrew as well, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Simon in Northamptonshire has been in touch. Simon, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thanks, Peter. I just wanted to say, to add a little bit of realism to this, I think a lot of people are expecting a very quick turnaround on this. Andrew's been released under investigation. I think this is going to be very awkward for the royal family, because this won't be a quick turnaround. It's not like where if you've got someone whose partners harass them, there's a 6-month statute of limitation. The police have to get it done in that time. As I understand it, there is no time limitation how long they can take to investigate this.
That's right.
And digital forensics, it's not going to be, he's not going to have a folder on his desktop just saying criminal activity. They're going to have to go through things, piece things together from a jigsaw. And it's not just going to be one device, because this is going back about 15 years. Yeah. Did you have that laptop then? Where is that email?
Well, it's interesting you mention that, Simon, because so many people say, oh, well, you've got the Epstein files. Why can't this just move really quickly? And the fact is the criminal justice moves far too slowly in general. But when it does come to something like this, and when you're arresting someone who is the king's brother, yes, everybody should be equal before the law, but at the same time, you've got to have your ducks in a row, as you should in any case, Simon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's going to happen is, for exactly the reason you've said, there's going to be so many eyes on this, they're going to want to do it properly. To have the type of people that go through digital forensics and look at this, police are under-resourced as it is anyway. You're not going to have a whole team of people sat there for 8 hours a day looking through it religiously. They are going to be in a queue of other cases that they've got to look at. Someone's got to understand it, digest it, so it's probably going to be a team of people. And I think what we're going to see here is, I think it's obvious this is a fishing trip. They're going to be looking around for other things while they're in there. But also Andrew's role, some of the documents on there, there'll be certain legal rights and privileges where they can't be analysed by police. So
there might be national security concerns. I mean, I'm not really sure how, given that it was 15 years ago, but nonetheless, the government will have to be consulted. They'll have to go through a process. You know, the security services might say, well, actually, there's some trade thing, or there's something that could damage international relations to go through. It is a complex thing, and it's naive for people to think this is going to happen quickly. And this has been dogging the royal family for years, rightly so. And I've absolutely no sympathy for them whatsoever. And I'm going to say something that some people might find controversial, but if Queen Elizabeth II covered anything up, and if she covered anything up in regard to Andrew, and if she helped that process, either in regard to this or in regard to any of the allegations in regard to women and girls, well, that is shameful. And I do think within all this, Simon, and I wonder what you think, we're going to be re-evaluating our thoughts on a lot of people, perhaps including Queen Elizabeth II.
Well, I think we always do. When you look at, I'm not going to name anyone specifically, but when celebrities have been disgraced after things have come out, you go back and you reassess where, oh, this person was seen as a national treasure then, this person was beloved then. You find things out that you just didn't know, and it completely changes your perception of it. But I think it's the longer this goes on, until he's actually, right, you're either charged or you're now released, we're not going to charge you, which I said could take years. This is just going to hang over the royal family because they cannot make any definitive statement for saying, well, he's innocent because the process is going on, or we want to draw a line under this. So I think that's probably, it's, as they say, trial by media. Yeah. This is going to be the worst punishment for him, just having it hanging over him, where he can at least say, look, if you're found guilty, you start to go through, you put your case forward. As
people often say, the punishment is the process, and even were he to be charged and even were he to be convicted, who knows what he might actually be sentenced to. I mean, there's so many different elements to this. Simon, I really appreciate your analysis there. Have you perhaps got some sort of criminal justice background yourself? You seem to know this stuff quite well.
Again, without mentioning who it is, I was involved just as a citizen, took an interest in investigating someone that's also charged with misconduct in public office, gone through, that took years from the revelations coming out to the charge coming. So you pick up bits, you get a bit of an interest, and you understand that when I was told then, this could take years, and it did. This is a far more complex case, and I'm like, I don't see this being resolved any time, say, within the next year or two.
Simon, keep in touch, give me a ring anytime, especially with your knowledge of all that process. Very, very interesting to hear from you. Thank you to Simon in Northamptonshire. Whatever you think about this, let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about an NHS quango which managed to hold 117 diversity events in just over a year, all during working hours, of course. Stay with us here on Talk.
morning to you. This is Tour de Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. Not just that the police have arrived at the Sandringham estate where Prince Andrew, as was now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is currently living since being thrown out of the Windsor estate. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation. And certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files was released in the last few weeks. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now then, let's talk about an NHS quango that managed to hold 117 diversity events between May 2024 and December 2025. You do slightly have to wonder whether they're actually looking after patients, because this is NHS quangos. This is the NHS Blood and Transplant, NHS Education for Scotland, NHS Professionals, and the NHS Resolution on. This is 2 working weeks of people's time, and many people's time as well. This is costing us a lot of money. So instead of working out how to treat patients better, they did queer art therapy, Black History Month, standing firm in power and pride, LGBT plus History Month quiz, LGBT Allies Session, International Transgender Day of Visibility, and EDI and Culture Survey Playback and Values Star of the Month. I mean, I'm not against sort of making sure that everybody feels included in their workforce. We have a workforce here at this station that I hope everybody feels included in, no matter what their politics are. And there are people of all sorts of different varying politics within here, or outlook, or sexuality, or whatever, ethnicity, whatever. But spending 2 weeks of this period of time doing this seems to me to be madness. Callum McGoldrick is a researcher at the Taxpayers Alliance. Callum, tell us your thoughts on this. This just seems to be, I mean, I do wonder about the people who don't want to take part in this. Whether you can say, actually, do you know what, I don't really want to take part in queer art therapy, not because I dislike gay people, but because I'm focusing on, you know, NHS blood and transplant services. Call me old-fashioned, Callum.
Well, good morning, Peter, and thank you very much for having me on. You're spot on in that in many cases, you imagine there's lots of staff that just want to go in, do their 9 to 5, do their hard hours, and then go home. But this sort of stuff that happens during work hours takes over. And the quangos claim that this sort of stuff happens only in lunchtime, so it's the staff time anyway. But when there's an hour and a half long event, when does the person eat? It's like, well, obviously, it's also
That's
eating
a long
into
lunch.
work day.
That's a long lunch. I mean,
Exactly.
I can tell you, I've taken many lunches in the private sector, which have been, you know, eating al desco, not al fresco, but al desco, having your sandwich and doing your work at the same time.
Yeah, and I think many people will resonate with that. I think a lot of us do that too. But the case is that we're always told that the NHS is stretched, and this is a support services for the NHS quangos that seem to be finding quite a lot of time to spend on things like this.
Yeah, it's funny actually. I remember starting one particular job when I worked at the BBC, and the news editor, who I came to call the anti-news because he has so little news ability. I remember who was told me on my first day, I really want you to take an hour for lunch. I sort of thought, well, that's nice, but actually, should that actually happen, especially when there's so much to do? An LGBT History Month quiz about LGBT History Month. I mean, that's fine as far as it goes, but I mean, if you're NHS Education for Scotland or NHS Professionals or the NHS Resolution, for example, there are far more important things to do, Callum. Is there any way back? Is there any way we can actually say, hold on a second, this is fine as far as it goes, but you can do it after work, or you can do it on a half-hour event at lunchtime?
Well, I don't think anyone would begrudge colleagues meeting up together in their own time after work. That's obviously completely fine, and especially when that's on their own time. I think the 2 rules that should come in is that there should be no taxpayer money going towards funding this stuff, and it shouldn't be happening within work hours.
I mean, taxpayer money, that's a very interesting one, certainly. A lot of these, the government would say, and I'm sure these NHS bodies would say that they have a commitment to diversity, and that's an incredibly important part of what they do. They would argue, I don't think it is at all, but actually how can they stick to their goals? Their goals would have to change, and a fundamental reset of all of this would have to happen. If it happens to the NHS, it has to happen elsewhere. I mean, I'm for it happening. I think it should happen. Callum, I want taxpayers to have good value for money, but I just wonder how realistic that is.
I mean, perhaps not so realistic under the current government. I hope, whether it's Reform or the Conservatives that come in next time, I hope they get a proper grapple on this sort of thing, because we've seen across the NHS as a whole, so not just the NHS quangos, but they're spending close to £1 million a year on this sort of thing.
I mean, I just think people will think how many nurses could be paid for with that money, how many operations could happen with that £1 million, and I do worry that there are far too many people sitting around talking about issues which are not that important at all when there's so much other work to do. And if there isn't the work to do, well, those people shouldn't be employed. And I do wonder about taxpayer value for money, Callum.
Well, this is the thing. It's whether it's costing money in terms of the actual pounds. That's one thing that's bad for taxpayers, but also the capacity of the staff, and that if they're spending a lot of their time going to LGBT month history quizzes rather than seeing patients, so well, this contributes to a backlog, which means that taxpayers are not getting value for money.
Of course it does. And I've often been in meetings where I've thought, how much is this meeting costing? Especially when I worked latterly in the civil service, alongside civil servants as a special advisor, thinking if we're sitting in this meeting for an hour with, 12 or 14 highly paid people, how much is this meeting actually costing when you add up the hourly rate of all those people? And is it a good use of time to actually do it? And I do wonder, Callum, how many people think, right, can I look this taxpayer, can I go out in the street and look the taxpayer in the eye and say that the amount of money that I have spent, I used to think this all the time, I had a dark night of the soul about flying to Northern Ireland for work when I was at the Northern Ireland office as a special advisor. I flew there usually twice a week. And I just thought, is this actually worth it? Do I need to be there? And sometimes I didn't go, sometimes I did go. But, is this actually worth it? Because my flight is paid for by the taxpayer. My taxi is paid for by the taxpayer. Is that actually worth it? And is that something I can look in the taxpayer straight in the eye? And I wonder how many civil servants think about that, or they just think, actually, this is just public money. It's somebody else's money. It's not something we need to worry about. It's only an hour of my time. It's only a meeting, with 6 people or 12 people or 18 people. It doesn't really matter, and this is all moving towards the common goal. That worries me, that those conversations aren't happening every day in those civil servants' minds.
Well, I wish more NHS managers in particular shared that outlook, especially those that run the sort of quangos that we're seeing host these events. I wish it was an attitude that was shared more broadly across the public sector. And it's worth saying that these sorts of events do happen across the entire public sector. We saw groups like the Environment Agency hosting a lunchtime event for tree hugging. So I've got no idea what value that provides to taxpayers.
For what? What was the event for, sorry?
Tree hugging.
Tree hugging. The Environment Agency held an event about tree hugging.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, you couldn't make it up. If that was in the thick of it, it would be rejected as too ridiculous a storyline.
Yeah, and this is a group that has tens of thousands of staff. It's a group that is responsible for billions of pounds of expenditure, and they think that this is the sort of thing that they should spend their time doing. I
mean, they are quite literally a bunch of tree huggers. Thank you, yeah. Callum. I appreciate that. That's Callum McGoldrick there, who's a researcher at Taxpayers Alliance. Great research there, and just an exposure of what is actually happening, where your money is going. And when you pay your taxes, you're thinking, hold on a second, is this going to an agency that is literally teaching people how to hug trees? I'm not sure much teaching is necessarily needed. We're going to talk more about Andrew, we're going to talk about Blair and Trump, and get your views as well. 0344 499 1000.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We'll talk about Andrew being arrested. We'll talk about Donald Trump warning Iran they have between 10 and 15 days before he's going to strike them with weapons. We'll also talk as well about Tony Blair praising Donald Trump for seeing Gaza's potential. We'll talk about that. And of course, Dave's point, the guy phoned in about aliens. He's right. In the last week, an ex-president and the current president of the United States have seemed to confirm aliens are real. This is potentially the biggest story in history. I know Talk want to be covering Andrew, but can we at least include this into the mix? Dave, I'm happy to read out your message, even though I think that's all a bit bonkers. But anyway, the Sun front page today, now he's sweating. That is Prince Andrew, or the former Prince Andrew, I should say. Still can't get out of the habit of calling him that. That astonishing photograph as well of him in the back of the car, which has gone right around the world, looking, well, shocked, dismayed, shell-shocked, just not wanting to be there, certainly. And I don't know about you, but I have absolutely zero sympathy for Andrew whatsoever. Lots to discuss on all of that. 0344 499 1000. You can text me at 722 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute, please, if you would, to the main number. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message to the main number, or give me a ring on the main number, which is, of course, 0344 499 1000. It's just gone 11 o'clock, and there is so much to talk about this morning between now and 1 o'clock. So do get in touch, including Jason, who has very pithily reacted to our last story with tree-hugging FFS. That's fair enough, Jason. That's an opinion, and you can have it broadcast. I'll perhaps not spell out what FFS means, but I think it means for flip's sake. Stay with us here on Talk. Right then, I want to talk about Donald Trump. I want to talk about Iran. Emily Schrader will be with me in a second. She's a journalist and Middle East expert. But first of all, I just want to see what Donald Trump has said about Iran having not very much time to get its act together and to capitulate to his demands. This is what the President of the United States has said.
What is the goal if there is a U.S. military strike?
Well, we'll either make a deal or we're going to get a deal one way or the other.
But with a military strike, is it to wipe out their nuclear...
I'm not going to talk to you about that, but we're either going to get a deal or it's going to be unfortunate for them.
And you said to make 3 days, giving them a deadline firm to make a deal?
I would think that would be enough time, 10, 15 days, pretty much maximum.
10 to 15 days maximum. Emily Schrader, the journalist and Middle East expert. What do you think of that? Good morning.
Good morning. Great to be with you. I mean, I think it's the same rhetoric we've seen from Trump for, I guess, now over a month. It started out with a stern warning to the Ayatollahs over their treatment of their own people, which, of course, they have continued killing. Even now, we see executions still taking place, mass arrests still taking place. And we've seen Donald Trump move forward with negotiations, much to the chagrin of the Iranian people, both in the diaspora and inside Iran. And now he's saying 10 to 15 days. We've also had reports from the White House that it could be minimal strikes first as early as this weekend, and then greater strikes if the regime does not indeed agree with his demands in terms of the negotiations. So, I mean, with Donald Trump, very difficult to predict. I do think something will happen. It's more of a question of when, not if, at this point.
When, not if. He says it could be very unfortunate for them. I just wonder if you think that, well, I suppose the question is, how have things changed since the summer? That was, of course, when Iran was bombed by the United States in regard to Israel. This is something very different, though, isn't it? It's related, but it's different.
It's absolutely different. I mean, we see even from the beginning when they're talking about negotiations, of course, there's just the discussion of the nuclear program. They still want to move forward with it, although they don't really have so much of a nuclear program anymore after past June. But they are trying, and they do have several hundred kilograms of highly enriched uranium that we don't necessarily know the whereabouts of. So this is a major issue on the nuclear front. But beyond that, they've been building they've been building ballistic missiles every single month since June. They've been trying to repair the missile launchers that Israel and the United States targeted in the last strikes back in June. So we know that they're prepping for some kind of war honestly, they have been for 48 years. Part of their ethos has been to destroy the state of Israel and destroy America, et cetera, et cetera. So this isn't really surprising. But the main game changer that we've seen is their treatment of their own people and the slaughter of more than 36,000 people.
That's what I want to talk about, Emily, because I don't want to be glib, I don't want to be simplistic about this. But how much has Donald Trump got those people in his mind? Because he said a number of weeks ago, help is on the way, when people were on the streets, when we could get some information about that. Information has been scarce, it's been piecemeal because of the huge repression, and perhaps you might want to outline exactly what your understanding is of what's happening of the people of Iran at this very moment. It's been going on for years, but particularly with those recent uprisings. We've had thousands of people killed. It's very important to focus on that, but without knowing the full picture, of course, that is a difficult thing too.
Of course. I mean, we're talking about a regime that has been using ambulances as cover for IRGC operatives. They have raided hospitals. There are reports from doctors and witnesses inside of hospitals saying that they shot injured protesters whom were already in the hospital. There are tens of thousands of people arrested. Many of them are on death row already. They've already been speeding up the trials in order to get these people executed. And on top of all that, we see the extrajudicial killings. We see that the IRGC forces have murdered more than at least 36,000 people. Based on the people that I've spoken to on the ground inside Iran, I would estimate it's more like 50 to 60,000, potentially even more. Just horrific scenes. And despite that, we're still seeing resistance on the ground inside Iran. Just in the past few days, we've seen a resurgence of small-scale protests, albeit nationwide, calling for an end to this regime, calling for accountability for the regime, and actually calling for the return of the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, which has actually been a united demand for the first time that we've seen across the nation inside Iran. So very interesting things happening on the ground here. Personally, I think Donald Trump has already waited far too long when it comes to the humanitarian concerns. This is something that he should have acted on immediately. At the same time, we don't know everything happening militarily. It could be that the United States is preparing for a much more intensive fight in order to ensure that this regime truly does fall. It would be the best thing, obviously, for the people of Iran. That's what they want. It's what they've been calling for. But beyond that, for the entire region, including the Arab world, including the state of Israel, and including the Western world, this is a regime that has spread radicalism and terrorism nationwide. I mean, there were dozens of attacks plotted by the IRGC inside the UK alone. And this has been their MO from the beginning, since 1979. And it's time. It's time for a regime change in Iran.
Do you think the UK gets it, Emily? Because we now have this ridiculous row saying that the UK government is probably not going to allow Donald Trump to launch strikes from UK air bases. There is an agreement there, but they have to agree to it. I just wonder, from your perspective, whether the UK gets it. You talked about the attacks we know on the streets of this country. There have been people who've been stabbed, who have been oppressed, who have been reported, who have had all sorts of dreadful action on UK soil against them by the Iranian regime. There are calls, of course, calls I totally support, to close and expel diplomats who are members of the Iranian regime. I just wonder whether you feel the UK gets it, and isn't it interesting that we've had hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of London protesting for human rights and for women's rights in Gaza, but not protesting in regard to Iran? There are lots of brave people who do that, but they're not often the same people.
Absolutely. I mean, the hypocrisy is very, very clear. Anyone who claims that they care about human rights, that was protesting for Palestinians, is silent now on Gaza. I mean, that speaks for itself. But I don't think the UK gets it. I don't think that they got it before. I don't think that they get it now. I think that they seem to be the last. Even in Europe, they seem to be the last to move forward
I wonder why that is. I wonder why that is, Emily, and let's get into that in a second. But just before that, I want to hear from our Foreign Secretary here in the UK, Yvette Cooper. She's been reacting to reports the UK has told the US they cannot use RAF bases for strikes in Iran.
The UK and the US have a long, deep security partnership. We work immensely closely. And on the issue of Iran, that is why we're supporting the US talks taking place with Iran, because frankly, the Iranian regime has continued to pose a security threat, has continued to pursue nuclear weapons, and that is why we've supported sanctions and also to increase diplomatic and economic pressure on the regime. That's what we believe is the right thing to do.
I mean, that sounds like total flim-flam effect. Emily, what do you think?
Absolute nonsense. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous response to think that after 48 years of the level of oppression that we've seen that regime carry out against their own people alone, that negotiations is going to change that. This regime, their etymology, their core is the destruction of the West. That's not going to change with negotiations. You know, if they're able to make a deal that somehow limits something, then I guess that's great, but that's not really the core of the issue. The core of the issue is the existence of the regime, and the Iranian people themselves have been leading that charge. This isn't something that's being imposed from the West. This isn't a regime change that's being pushed or demanded by world leaders in Washington, D.C. or in London. This is something that's coming from the people, and we owe it to them to listen to them and to listen to what they're asking for at the cost of their own lives. Tens of thousands of people being killed in the streets for freedom. And instead of taking a stand with those people, we see Western leaders like Yvette Cooper, the minister here, saying, oh, well, we believe that talking to their oppressors is the right solution. No, that's not the right solution.
And at what
the
stage
right solution is regime change.
And at what stage do you actually say, we've tried negotiation, it hasn't worked, and war or bombing is a form of diplomacy? It's a form of diplomacy that happens when everything else is exhausted. And as you correctly say, this is the people of Iran and their allies right around the world asking for this. I mean, if the UK doesn't allow these the US military to take off from the bases here in the UK, well, what are the options for Donald Trump? What could he do militarily?
Well, I don't think that the United States military has any shortage of options when it comes to carrying out a large-scale operation against the Islamic Republic. We know that there are many bases in the Middle East, and I'm sure that they will swear left, right, and sideways that they also won't let the United States use them. At the end of the day, I think it's clear what's going to happen if that is what the president decides to do. He'll figure out a way to do it one way or the other. There is also the issue of the state of Israel, which may also be involved in something like this, particularly targeting the missile launchers and the ballistic missile storage. That may also be an element of attacks that we see on this regime. But again, everything is up in the air right now. We don't know exactly what's going to happen or when, but I do believe very firmly that something will happen.
Emily, superb analysis. Let's talk again. That's Emily Schrader there, who's a journalist and Middle East expert. Thanks to Andy in Clondudno, who says, Iran with nuclear weapons, that's a North Korea on our doorstep. Sean in Bridlington says, I despise our Prime Minister and government. I'm increasingly ashamed to call myself British. How did we come to this? And Kate in Warwickshire says, I worked in the NHS in the 80s and 90s. It was the most diverse workplace. Every team I worked with, without exception, had black or Asian, gay staff in senior positions, as in not unqualified. Something must have gone very wrong if suddenly the NHS has become a racist or homophobic organisation, or perhaps someone is making a lot of money. I don't know about you, Kate, but I mean, that is a really, really good point. Anytime I've gone into the NHS, anytime I've used the NHS, it has been probably one of the most diverse parts of British society. So why do they need all this diversity stuff? Is there a great scourge of racism? Is there a great scourge of homophobia within the NHS? I think not. I think this is just woke nonsense. And most people aren't prejudiced. Most people get along with other people. Most people just rub along. And actually, when it comes to the NHS, we wanted to work to serve patients and to make sure people are better. That's what I wanted to do. If you want to do that in the private sector, it's interesting. I do wonder how much the private sector in comparison spends on all this stuff. I think they do it sometimes because they have to, but certainly when I've worked in the private sector, I haven't had nearly as much of this nonsense. And a lot of it is, I'm afraid, nonsense. Some of the stuff is quite useful. I went to a workshop one time on trauma, on the sort of how upsetting it can be sometimes to hear difficult things on air and to do this job and all the rest of it. That was quite useful. That was a lunchtime. I did it on my own time and it was about 45 minutes. It just made me think about things in a slightly different way. That was something that the company paid for and was a good thing. Am I going to sit and do a quiz about LGBT History Month? I don't think so. I don't think so, although I'm sure Julia Hartley-Brewer would love to. Lots to discuss on all of this. Carl Turner, the Labour MP for Hull East, will be with us on Andrew next and a number of other matters. Stay with us here on Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. Not just that the police have arrived at the Sandringham estate where Prince Andrew, as was now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is currently living since being thrown out of the Windsor estate. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation. And certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files was released in the last few weeks. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk now to Carl Turner, the Labour MP for Hull East. Carl, good morning. You're welcome to the programme. How are you doing?
Good morning, Peter. Doing well, thank you.
What do you make of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor being arrested? Obviously innocent until proven guilty. That's the system we have. But when you look at this picture, this astonishing pictures on the front page, I think of basically every newspaper today of him looking haunted, you know, annoyed, shell-shocked and all the rest of it. I have absolutely zero sympathy for him. I want to be really, really clear about that. What do you think, Carl?
Well, it's a massive fall from grace, but I think you're right to mention that he's innocent until proven guilty. This is very early in terms of the police investigation. I suspect it'll last for months, probably even years, actually. There's a potential for this dragging out for a very long period. If he's tried and then convicted, it's a different kettle of fish. But at the minute, he's an innocent man before the law.
What should happen in regard to the police protection officers as well? I was talking to Di Davies a little bit earlier on, who's former head of Royal Protection, and he said, look, if these officers see any wrongdoing whatsoever, we're not talking necessarily about the big things that Andrew is accused of and denies, it should be said, or what he's been arrested for. We're talking about even minor things, even, you know, 16-year-old royals having a pint, which is illegal, and if you have a police officer there, they should do something about it. And when it comes to the big stuff as well, of course they should act. But surely there's a case to answer for them, for other members of the royal family. We've had King Charles say the law must take its course and we'll help if we can. Well, surely the royal family helped cover things up. Will we be re-evaluating the role of Queen Elizabeth II, for example, Carl?
Well, look, I think in relation to close protection officers, you've been around senior politicians, Peter, and you know what the job they do is a very strange job, actually.
It's a tough job, and you're absolutely right. And I worked with the Home Secretary, I worked with the Northern Ireland Secretary, and it's in some ways it's a really boring job. In other ways, you've got to react incredibly quickly if something happens. And the officers I worked with were absolutely superb. In fact, one of them, I must mention this actually, one of them, when my boss got cancer, James Brokenshire got cancer, this guy changed his leave. So he cancelled his leave and changed his leave so he could accompany James to various cancer appointments. So I have nothing but the highest regard for the officers I worked with. But if there are ones who have questions to answer, well, those questions, of course, should be answered, Carl.
It's an incredibly strange job, actually, because their number one priority is to protect the person who they're the security officer for. And if anybody comes within contact who might be dangerous, they deal with the situation. I'm not sure it's their job to be sort of grassing up people for doing this or that thing. I mean, if it's serious criminality, that's a different kettle of fish. I mean, it's everybody's duty to report serious criminality, but we don't know what was going on in Mountbatten's Windsor's life.
We know some of it, Carl. We know that there are certain allegations, and we know we've seen the picture of him with Virginia Giuffre, for example. I mean, surely there are questions to be answered here.
I think that they probably were reporting it to their superior officers, I suspect, because I think that would be the procedure. But it depends what's not being done at the senior end, I think. That's the issue.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you can blame individual royals for not acting. I think they probably knew that some things were going on. I mean, what do you do?
But Carl, come on. If senior royals knew certain things were going on, if they knew things were happening and they didn't report that to the police, that is a cover-up.
I think it is, and I think if that is proven, then it's a different story, isn't it? But I mean, at the minute, we don't really know what's been occurring. I mean, look, I just want to say, look, I've got very little sympathy for Mountbatten Windsor either. But actually, he did look like a broken man. He's had a massive fall from grace. I do sometimes concern myself about mental health, and he looks like a man who needs some support mentally.
Well, I think the victims may well need some mental health support as well. We're actually going to be talking about that a little bit later on in terms of the impact on them. Let's talk a bit about Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister, obviously a member of your party, the Labour Party. He has been very proactive in a lot of this, contacting 6 police forces that cover airports used by Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the reason Andrew was arrested was not to do with any of this. It was actually to do with misconduct in public office, to do with his role as a trade envoy. But of course, it's all linked to Epstein because Epstein appeared to be the recipient of some of those emails. But Gordon Brown sending a 5-page memo to the police a week after sending more evidence relating to Epstein's movements. It was sent to the Metropolitan Police, Surrey, Sussex, Thames Valley, Norfolk and Bedfordshire constabularies, which of course cover Heathrow, Gatwick, Luton, RAF Marham and RAF Horsham, alongside other airports and air bases. Gordon Brown is quoted as saying, "This memorandum provides new and additional information to that which I submitted last week to the Met, Essex and Thames Valley Police Forces, where I expressed my concern that we secure justice for trafficked girls and women." What do you think of his role here, Carl?
I think it's a very important role that Gordon's doing. I think the reality is we've got to be a bit careful because the stuff that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has been arrested and interviewed for is not about the victims of the sex trafficking. I think Gordon Brown rightly wants to get it onto the victims, and I think that's why he's acting now and being quite forceful in his, preparing what is essentially evidence for the police to investigate on the sex trafficking stuff rather than this misconduct in public office. If he's guilty of something, he'll be tried. Let's hope he gets, let's hope the evidence is there and that he gets tried. But he needs a fair hearing, and we've got to be careful about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
People are innocent.
Well,
we're proven guilty.
We're certainly not going to prejudice criminal proceedings here at Talk, and I'm sure no one in the Labour Party would want to do that either. Will the Prime Minister slightly be breathing a sigh of relief that the word Mandelson is not being used very much this week?
I'm not sure he will, because, this potentially implicates Mandelson as well. I mean, there is an investigation with the police at the moment about misconduct in public office, and if Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is having his collar felt, I suspect there's a real chance of Mandelson having his collar felt anytime soon. So it's not, the government are not out we're not in the clear.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the truth is the Prime Minister has to continually answer questions about Mandelson when he'd rather be talking about the cost of living and other issues that concern people on the ground.
Antonia Romeo has been appointed Cabinet Secretary, the most senior civil servant in the country, and she today is day 2 for her, and she will have been intimately involved with all of this. How do you think the government is handling this sort of triangle between the Cabinet Office, Downing Street and the Palace? We've had the King coming out with a personal statement yesterday talking about justice being done and, let the law take its course and so on. How do you think both the government and the monarchy have been dealing with this?
I think King Charles came out with a statement yesterday saying exactly what you'd expect him to say. The reality is, you know, he wants the law to take its course. He wants proper investigation, and potentially he'll help the royal family, that is, will help the police with all of their inquiries. That's the right thing to say. But what else could he say? But it's a strange scenario, this, Peter. Can you imagine this? I mean, it's effectively Rex versus Mountbatten Windsor if it ever gets to criminal proceedings in a trial.
That's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about that, actually. Yeah.
You know, Big Brother is actually, you know, taking on behalf of the state, his little brother. I mean, it's a scenario that the royal family could never imagine finding themselves in. In terms of what the government can do in relation to this, I think we have to be really careful. I don't think politicians actually should be really questioning the actions of the royal family, because all of a sudden it won't be very long before the royal family are questioning actions of government, and that's a bad place. That is what we have to be careful about. So I suspect the Prime Minister will be very cautious. We've got to help with inquiries. If there's anything that government ministers know, we've got to help. But I tell you something as well, what we've got to be very careful about. We have at the moment the Cabinet Office investigating a cabinet minister. It won't watch. It can't watch. It's got to be independent. It looks and it smacks to the general public as a cover-up. This guy, this minister who's been accused of shenanigans with journalists, I don't know the guy, I've never met him. But the fact that a minister is being investigated by a cabinet office. You're talking
about
really bad.
You're talking about Josh Simons there, and this goes back to the reports in the Sunday Times last week about the dossier that was put together by a public affairs company, a lobbying firm, about a number of journalists, including Gabriel Pogrund and Harry York, the Whitehall editor and deputy political editor, respectively, of the Sunday Times. I think you're right about the independence of that investigation, and I mean, I don't know about you, Carl, but I often see Cabinet Office investigations not getting very far. When I've been interviewed for example, a leak inquiry, I was interviewed, I wasn't leaking, but other people were, and they don't seem to be that effective. An independent investigation, as you say, would be a much more opposite thing and give public confidence into all of this. It does seem astonishing that Josh Simons is continuing in his role. Whilst he was head of Labour Together, this dossier was commissioned from APCO, and £36,000 was spent on it, Carl.
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, I'm sure that they do it fairly and impartially, but whatever it finds, the public have got a right to say, hang on, we're not trusting in that, because it's effectively the government marking its own homework. And we've cautioned the Prime Minister. I think John McDonnell is out saying, look, let's be careful, let's do it properly, let's have a proper impartial investigation. It's like when Max Sweeney was required to investigate Max Sweeney.
Yes.
It is just outrageous. I mean, what do you expect the public to think when these sort of whitewash type of inquiries end up being presented as factual? Let's get a grip of it.
What about the organisation that Josh Simons was part of, Labour Together? That was essentially the pet think tank of your friend Keir Starmer. Should he distance himself from that? Should he say that he'll take no more advice or briefings or have anything more to do with Labour Together?
Well, I just think it's honestly, I think it's outrageous that we are persuaded or persuadable by a think tank. We're government. We're in government. We're supposed to be governing in the interests of the country.
So should Keir Starmer cut them loose, Carl?
I think so, frankly. I don't know Labour Together. I've never been involved in the organisation. I'm seen in the Labour Party as on the left, I think. I used to be before Jeremy came along. As soon as Jeremy Corbyn came along, everybody else was a right-winger. But I used to be, when I first came into Parliament in 2010, I was one of the few who joined the Socialist Campaign Group. I mean, my colleague Alan Johnson used to think I was a mad lefty when I was first elected in 2010. But I've had nothing to do with Labour Together. But the idea of this guy comes into Parliament in 2024, and 15 minutes thereafter is a minister in the Cabinet Office. It just looks, doesn't it just look like jobs for the mates?
Well, it doesn't look great, and it doesn't look great that he's still in that position with this investigation ongoing. We'll return to that story. Carl, as always, thank you, Carl Turner, MP, Labour MP for Hull East. What do you think of what he's saying there about Andrew, about Starmer, about Mandelson, and indeed about Josh Simons, this government minister who's under investigation because of what has happened when he was part of an organisation called Labour Together. He was head of it. They commissioned research into journalists which smeared them, which made incorrect assertions, completely false assertions about them doing Russia's bidding. All absolute nonsense, and the surveillance state idea, especially when we look at what happened a number of months ago when the police service in Northern Ireland talked about hacking or attempting to hack journalists' phones. It really does worry me. Journalists should be allowed to do their job. Certainly not all of them are perfect. We know that, of course they're not, but they need freedom and a free press and a free society to do that, to do their work. Liam says, this is not my government and I withdraw my consent. They make me sick and frankly America can do what they like and use the bases as they see fit. I will take no offence, says Liam. And Barry says war is diplomacy by other means. You're absolutely right, Barry. It is a form of diplomacy. It's the last chance saloon, essentially, when it comes to diplomacy. Lots more to discuss in just a second. We're going to talk to Robert Bates about the migration situation. Households pocketing more than 15 billion in benefits in just 18 months, migrant households, and homes containing at least one unemployed foreign national accounting for 70% of the welfare bill, according to Robert's research. We'll talk to him in just a second. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch. We'll take more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes in a minute or two. And very, very interesting from London Oil Trader, who's contacted me on Twitter. I'll look through some of the tweets in the next break. Gordon Brown is only getting involved to try to deflect from his role. He is a fraud and should be investigated too, says London Oil Trader. He employed Mandelson. Well, certainly the two men had very little love lost between them, and I think Brown employed Mandelson because he felt he had to. Still did it. I want to talk now about two bits of research from Robert Bates, the research director at the Centre for Migration Control. Migrant households pocketing more than 15 billion in benefits in just 18 months, and homes containing at least one unemployed foreign national accounting for 70% of that staggering bill, according to the research. Robert, you're very welcome to the programme. Just take us through this all.
Morning, Peter. Yes, so the DWP has begun publishing data on the number of foreign nationals claiming universal credit. They haven't actually been publishing the amount that is being paid regularly to those households that do contain at least one foreign national, because of course as a household benefit you have to go just on if one individual is a foreign national. And what we see from really these figures is something that dispels this myth that many on the left of the argument peddle about the numbers of foreign nationals claiming universal credit, because for them it's simply a case of, oh well, they're all working in low wage jobs and thus the majority of those claiming are in-work benefits. But actually what this data shows is that the vast majority of payments that we're making to foreign nationals is for those who are just simply not in employment at all. And actually, if you look across the last 3 or 4 years of data, we've seen about a 55% increase in the number of unemployed foreign nationals claiming universal credit. And this is part of the reason why there is a skyrocketing in the cost of the total universal credit bill going to foreign nationals. It's about 10 billion-ish a year currently. I think in 2025 we'll have seen it reached about 12 billion. And this is something before we've even got into conversations about the Boris way of obtaining indefinite leave to remain.
These are astonishing numbers, Robert. And when it comes to contributing to society, if people are here, if they're born here, if they're disabled, for example, I have absolutely no problem with them getting welfare payments. If people genuinely cannot find a job, we should support them to some degree, but we should help them as much as we can to find a job. We know unemployment is very high and has gone up in recent days. But if you have contributed absolutely nothing to our society, if you simply turn up here as a foreign national, if you turn up as an asylum seeker who's then granted asylum, and then are given benefits having contributed nothing, and you look at these huge numbers, is it any wonder our taxes are so high? Is it any wonder people feel very disengaged with the state and feel that politics has failed them, Robert?
And when you consider, so it's about 6 billion a year goes to unemployed migrant households. You consider what that 6 billion is the equivalent of. It's equivalent of about 900,000 income tax and national insurance payments from full-time employed workers. We could train with just 1 year's worth of that figure, 20,000 doctors all the way through from the start through to the end of their training process. You know, it's a huge.
It's not fair, Robert. And the thing that annoys me is that there'll be people watching this, or there'll be people who see a clip of this online later or whatever, say, oh, you know, this is just racism, this is just dreadful against migrants, you know, you hate asylum seekers, you hate people from abroad. That's not the point. The point is that if you're going to come to this country, if we've room for you, if you can contribute, if you can pay taxes and you can support yourself and perhaps your family as well, that's fine. I'm okay with that if we've room for you and if there's capacity. But the problem is there isn't capacity. We don't have the resources. We have so many problems with access to schools, housing, healthcare, and so on. And then we have people who go to work every single day, who are getting up in the morning. We're the station of strivers, the grafters who go to work every day. There'll be people in their van, people working in their office at the moment, listening to this in the background, or maybe watching it at home, who are working later, or maybe doing a night shift tonight or something like that. You think, why am I doing this? What is going on here? Why am I paying so much tax, more tax as a proportion of what the country makes since the Second World War? And anybody who gets their payslip will see how much tax and national insurance is coming out of that right now. And we're in a situation, Robert, where this is happening, and 70% of the bill is to do with a home containing one unemployed foreign national. If you're unemployed and you're a foreign national, you should be given a very, very short time to get a job, or you should be told, sorry, we can't support you anymore, off you go.
I think that's absolutely spot on. I think that the whole basis of the immigration system that we've seen over the last 20 years was that it would be good for the country and it would bring unbridled wealth and prosperity and take this country towards the land of El Dorado, effectively. And, you know, when you see figures like this and you contrast it with actually those lines that politicians have been peddling for so long, you kind of do feel that the British people have just been downright misled about what the actual implications are of handing out in some years, you know, over 1 million visas in a go, because this indefinitely to remain status effectively does allow individuals to not have to make a contribution. It does allow them all the entitlements effectively of citizenship, bar a few with regards to voting. And you kind of think in many cases they'll have, yes, come in and done a low wage, low skilled job for a few years. But then as soon as they get given this indefinitely to remain status, they have an access to the full panoply of the British welfare state. And it's really staggering when you consider that 1 in 3 people currently with indefinite leave to remain are claiming universal credit. That is a scale that's way out of kilter, a proportion that's way out of kilter when you compare it to the British population, where it's about 18%, so slightly less than 1 in 5. There's a huge discrepancy there, and that is indicative actually of many individuals coming into the UK finding themselves not able to make an economic contribution and realising just how easy it is to access a largesse that the British state does not need to be extending to them. There was data we produced last year which showed that actually a foreign national will apply for universal credit, take what's called the habitual residence test and pass it every 43 seconds. So there's a clear growing problem here of individuals looking to get access to the welfare state. And I think it's time we actually just said, no, you need to be making a contribution if you're coming to Britain.
I think that all of that makes perfect sense, and that is just common sense, really, from Robert Bates there. Robert Bates, Research Director of the Centre for Migration Control. Thanks for that, and thanks for sharing your research with us. I appreciate that. Thanks also to Nat, who's in Tel Aviv, who has reacted to what we're talking about in regard to Iran. She says, "Hi Peter, I will be forever grateful to President Trump for helping free our hostages, but sadly he's already let the Iranian people down. Empty threats with the terrorists equals more innocent lives taken. Still, better late than never. We're scared, but ready, well, as ready as we'll ever be." And actually another friend who was going out to Israel to see his family has been in touch to say he's now not going. He's postponed that trip for a few months, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens in the Middle East. And of course there's so many Israeli viewers and listeners to these programs. Often we have people, not just Nat, but many others as well in Israel, who are worried about if America attacks Iran, will Iran attack Israel? And I think the two are, you know, almost certain to happen, unfortunately, in the next little while. I don't want there to be war. I don't want there to be bombings. But if that frees the Iranian people, and if that makes the world a safer place and gets rid of this dreadful regime, horrible, oppressive, dreadful regime with clear implications for this country as well and what has happened here, well, that may just need to happen. And unfortunately, when you have people like Yvette Cooper who will do anything to avoid this and say, oh, well, we need to continue diplomacy. Well, we've spoken to attempted diplomacy, attempted jaw. Maybe it's time for war. I don't encourage that. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't want it to happen. But if it has to happen, well, then it has to happen. What do you think about this? 0344 499 1000. Also, what do you think about migrant households pocketing more than £15 billion in benefits in just 18 months? We're talking about foreign nationals who are unemployed accounting for 70% of that staggering bill. Whatever your thought, however you want to contact me, please do so. 0344 499 1000. Plenty of time for calls between now and 1 o'clock. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell, and I'll go through some of those tweets in just a second. During the break, I'll have a look at my phone. You can also send me a voice note, less than a minute, please, to the main number. You can send me a WhatsApp text message to the main number, or give me a ring on the main number, which is, of course, 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about Donald Trump in a second, about his administration launching a website that could let British and European internet users bypass online safety laws. Is this a good idea? We'll ask Emma Trimble. Stay with us.
We genuinely are on resignation watch. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Labour MPs, they say, listen, Keir, your position is untenable. This is all about appointing that rat, Peter Mandelson, who faces a criminal investigation.
Can Keir Starmer survive the Mandelson scandal? We have breaking news for you. We've just been talking about, of course, Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff. We've now had another resignation from Number 10. In Keir Starmer's Director of Communications, Tim Allen, has now also resigned. The plot is thickening. The noose is tightening.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Julia, who's been in touch from St Albans, saying I look forward to Mandelson being arrested. Interesting, he put Andrew forward for foreign envoy, overriding Charles's objections. Maybe Mandelson saw Andrew as a naive and useful tool. Well, we don't know whether Mandelson's going to be arrested, but we do know, of course, that there have been searches at 2 of his homes. Must be nice to have 2 homes. Carl from Birmingham says, for listeners and viewers saying, why are you doing non-stop coverage of Andrew? They have to realise it's the biggest news story at the moment, which Talk is covering brilliantly. Keep it up. Thank you. On Daniel from Epsom, who said earlier on we should be talking about aliens, there's good news. We're going to. We've responded to public demand. And as I often say, when I am on the air, it's my show, but it's your show too. And we've had quite a number of people saying that they want to talk about aliens. And if you want to talk about aliens, we will talk about aliens. We're going to do it in a few minutes' time. We'll talk, of course, about Andrew. We'll talk about Trump and Iran and so on. But we will respond to public demand, although Perry says Daniel from Epsom needs to be beamed up, I think. Angela on Andrew says, William, it's inconceivable that William didn't know and didn't speak out. Well, certainly Prince William, there's no suggestion he did anything wrong. But what he has done, he appears to have been behind so much of this. He appears to have been behind so much of this effort against Andrew, stripping him of his titles and so on, persuading his father, and knowing that William, of course, as will be king one day. Let's hope it doesn't happen for a while. But I want Charles to live a long and happy life. But nonetheless, William will eventually be king if all goes to plan. And certainly he has a role in this, and it seems to be that he seems to be one of the ones with a conscience, and he is one of the ones who has, one of the royals who has been speaking out about this to some degree, although there's a lot more I think the royal family could do. And I do think, and I'd be interested to hear from callers on this as well, do you think the role of Queen Elizabeth II is going to be re-evaluated? We're going to talk to Norman Baker about that. He's a Republican. He's also someone who's done a lot of work on looking into the royal finances and who knew what when. So we'll talk to him a little bit later on that. But I want to talk now to Emma Trimble, who's a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, about this story about Donald Trump's administration launching a website that could let British and European internet users bypass online safety laws. Emma, lovely to talk to you. Hope you're well. Tell me about this story and why you think it's a good thing.
It's absolutely fantastic the United States is standing up for our freedom of speech and our liberties here in this country, and they have effectively made freedom of speech into a diplomatic issue. I mean, it is the diplomatic issue in the special relationship at the moment. And this new project, it looks as if it's being headed by Sarah Rogers, who's an Undersecretary of State in the United States. And she's turning out to be a bit of a legend crusading to protect freedom of speech in Britain and in Europe more broadly. Now, this is a response to the way that the European Union and also here in Britain have been clamping down on expression, clamping down on websites, talking about banning websites such as X because Grok was making these risque images. I think that's probably the most radio and TV appropriate way of referring to it. They were talking about banning, there's been talk about banning X in other European countries as well. We've seen an increasing amount of censorship online. And so what this is effectively is a portal, a website, freedom.gov, which apparently has "freedom is coming" as a reference to the British are coming on the holding site for that, which will allow people from Britain, from around the world, to be able to access information that is censored by their own governments.
Now, the point, Emma, of the Online Safety Act was, the government said, to protect people. The point was that harmful content couldn't be there. I mean, I am very sceptical about legislation that can't keep up with the technology anyway. What you described on Grok, for example, is something that the Online Safety Act couldn't perhaps necessarily have conceived. But I just wonder, given that the Online Safety Act has social media giants facing fines of up to £18 million, I mean, how does this new website work? Is it essentially like a VPN idea, or just a portal that you can look up anything? And surely people will use it to look up things that can be harmful.
My understanding is that it effectively functions like a VPN. But one of the early drafts of the Online Safety Act used the term legal but harmful in relation to content that would be censored with respect to adults, not just with respect to children. And one of the prevailing concerns that hasn't gone away about this legislation is that it would censor people's right to freedom of speech. So what the Americans are doing here, we don't know exactly what form this is going to take, but what they're doing is they're standing up for people's right to be able to express their opinions freely. I don't think this is about allowing people to access malign content, which of course people could still do on the dark web anyway. Technology is such now that if people are going to try and access that stuff, they'll find a way to do it anyway. But this is about standing up for freedom of speech. And I think fundamentally it's about putting pressure on European governments and on our government not to unfairly and in a sort of like grossly overstepping the boundaries of what is acceptable for a government to do, to not trample on the freedom of expression of Europeans and of British citizens. So
how do you think the Online Safety Bill has actually done that? Because X is still there. In what way do you think the Online Safety Bill, as it is, well, the Online Safety Act as it is now, has actually restricted our freedom? What's the evidence of that?
Well, the Free Speech Union have put out some examples of this. And I myself did an interview with Ben Jones from the Free Speech Union, where we were looking at some of the very early examples just in the first week of the Act coming in, where it was preventing people from being able to see things like protest footage, tweets that were historical in nature. It was censoring all sorts of things that it probably, shouldn't have been covering. But this isn't about the Online Safety Act specifically. This is about the attitude of European governments and of our government towards the freedom of speech of its citizens. And that stretches far beyond the Online Safety Act.
You're absolutely right. At what point do you think this affects the relations between the UK and the US, where you have not just the Online Safety Act, but lots of other provisions as well, and the attitude, I suppose, of the UK government, which is being undermined by the American government? Many people say, and you would say that's a good thing, but what do you think that says about US-UK relations, especially in the context we're talking about Iran as well today, and the fact that there are tensions there too?
Well, like I say, I think that this has become the diplomatic issue in our relationship with the United States. We saw this when J.D. Vance spoke way back last year at the Munich Security Conference, where people who are opposed to Vance, who are opposed to Trump, saw this as him knocking Europe and as him sort of laying into us. But the way that I see this is that the United States is being a friend of the British people. It's being a critical friend. And it's standing up for the rights of citizens, not only in Britain, but also in Europe. And I mean, this relates to issues to do with migration, because we've also seen, this recent case of the Crown Prosecution Service continuing to pursue Hamid Koskan, the man who burned a Quran, even though his previous conviction was quashed. They've continued to pursue him to try and get him prosecuted for burning that Quran. So I think from the perspective of the United States, they see what in their psyche is their motherland, stepping all over and treading all over the liberties of the British people. And I think that they want us to be a closer ally to them. They see this in a civilizational perspective. They want us to be protecting our liberties, standing up for freedom of speech, for freedom of religion, for the freedom to protest. And they see something that is to them and to me as well, a sort of malign and slightly authoritarian instinct on the part of this government to trample all over our liberties. So, I mean, it has become the diplomatic issue, but I don't think that it's in any hostile sense. I think they want what's best for us, and they're trying to stand up for citizens against the bad behaviour of our government.
Emma, thank you very much for all of your thoughts on that. That's Emma Trimble. Also want to thank you, Emma, just while you're here, actually, for encouraging me to, I remember chatting to you outside a pub one evening, and I was thinking of writing a book, but wasn't quite sure whether to write it or not. And you said, go on, Peter, write the book. I did, and now it's published. So thank you very much for that, Emma. It was good to be encouraged by you, and I encourage you in what you do too at the New Culture Forum. That is Emma Trimble, Senior Fellow of the New Culture Forum there. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Ian in Middlesex, who says, don't forget that we are borrowing to pay that benefits bill. We can't afford it. We're not only stuck with the cost, but also the cost of borrowing for years to come. Thanks to Rachel, who says, in reference to your comment earlier regarding Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, I am also very concerned that it's discovered the royals and even Her Majesty may have known a lot about Andrew's alleged activities and tried to sweep them under the carpet. I sincerely hope this doesn't prove to be true. Paul says, perhaps I've missed something, but I've never heard it discussed how much Mandelson knew of Andrew's association with Epstein. He could have used his knowledge to get an ambassador's role. Well, Paul, it's very interesting because there is new evidence out there that Mandelson was pushing for Andrew to get that trade envoy role. We don't know whether that was to do with Epstein or not, but I think it's a reasonable thing to say that there is suspicion over that. Mick in Wallington says Carl Turner is becoming a common sense czar. More, please. And Dave in London says, I think Gordon Brown also needs to be investigated for having all this information for so long. When was the last time one of Epstein's aircraft came to the UK? It certainly wasn't last week. Well, with Gordon Brown, no suggestion he's done anything wrong, of course. The point with Gordon Brown is that he might not have known bits and pieces that maybe his dossier was put together after the Epstein files came out. We just don't know. I'd love to interview Gordon Brown about that. Mick says, Peter, get off your high horse about close protection officers. They're not state grasses, but they're to protect. Chiefs set the guidelines. They must be the ones held to account. That's fine, Mick. Cliff in Berkshire says, I agree with Carl. I don't believe one has a general duty in law to report crimes to the authorities. The only exceptions are specific relationships, as is the case for teachers, social workers in certain cases. Well, we're talking about a duty of candour as well as a very, very interesting point. On Iran, Anne in Oakley says appeasement never works. Andrew in Hertfordshire is on the line. What do you think about Iran and the UK, Andrew? Thanks for your patience.
No, thanks, Peter. I think it's actually a really low point. If you think of the Labour government, what they'd love to have is a good relationship with Hamas and Hezbollah, because that actually is the, yeah, come on, that's their base. They know that if they don't have that relationship with extremist terrorists, then people will coalesce around the Green Party and Corbyn.
Really? You think that's part of it? And do you think that Starmer honestly thinks that he could sit down and negotiate with Hamas and Hezbollah?
I actually genuinely don't think he could put together the component parts of a ham sandwich. The government is run by the Attorney General. Every decision goes through him. So that's why we're in this inertia in relation to everything. The Chagos Islands. When you look at that decision and you look at this decision, we need to support America to cut the head off the snake. Iran falls, Hezbollah falls, Hamas falls. Extremist Muslims are finished, and we can all work together.
Do you think that would honestly solve the problem if Iran falls? Do you not think it's a much wider problem than that? You can't kill an ideology.
No, the ideology is extremist Muslims, in the same way as you suffered in Northern Ireland with extremist terrorism.
Yep.
That will always be a battle that we have. But what we need to do is give the platform to the moderate people in Iran. And just think of that young girl, like any girl in London, she took her headscarf off and they beat her to death. And Harmer and Starmer don't think that's worth fighting for. Think about that.
Very interesting, Andrew. Listen, thank you. I'd recommend a book by Jonathan Harunoff on that. I've interviewed him in this programme specifically about that Iranian protest a few years ago. Interesting to see some of the roots of that still there. Thanks for your opinions, Andrew. Much appreciated. Plenty more opinions coming your way on Andrew, on the royal family in general, and on aliens too, because that's what you want to talk about. We will talk about that. Also more on Iran too. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. And with Andrew arrested, what does it mean for Epstein's victims and the potential alleged victims of Andrew? He denies that, of course, that he has been involved in anything nefarious in regard to sexual crimes. We know that what he's been arrested for is to do with misconduct in public office, to do with his role as a trade envoy. But what about the victims seeing him arrested? We've heard from the Giuffres about this, certainly when it comes to Virginia Giuffres' family. She alleges that Andrew raped her. That is something that he denies, of course. Daniel Britton will be with us as well. He's a constitutional historian to talk about what Parliament could do and all the different implications, what it means when you're eighth in line to the throne and you are someone who has been arrested. We'll talk to Norman Baker about that as well. We'll also talk about the US-Iran 10-day or 15-day ultimatum. More on that coming up from Alan Mendoza a little bit later on. And yes, you've asked us to talk about aliens, and we will be doing that with Andy Lown, because both Obama and indeed Trump have said that aliens may actually be a thing. So we'll talk about the extraterrestrial life. Is there intelligent life out there? Well, you are intelligent life, so give me your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute, please, if you would, to 0344 499 1000. WhatsApp text messages can be sent on that number as well, and that is the number, of course, for phone calls. So much to discuss here on Talk. Stay with us. Well, just a bit of a development on the Andrew story. Global Counsel, which is the advisory firm co-founded by Peter Mandelson, has collapsed into administration in the fallout from the scandal surrounding his historic links to the paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein. Administrators have now confirmed that. It was thought that that had happened yesterday, but that has now been confirmed by administrators. That is Global Counsel. That is a lobbying firm that Peter Mandelson set up with a man called Benjamin Wegg-Prosser, who was a sort of sidekick. They've both left that. In fact, Global Counsel kicked them out a couple of weeks ago, but that has collapsed into administration in the fallout from the scandal surrounding the historic links to Jeffrey Epstein, and whoever is working for that firm, for that lobbying firm, will undoubtedly lose their jobs as a result. The Times, the arrest of Andrew arrested on the Daily Telegraph. It's on the front page of, I think, every single paper is that image. The Guardian, King says law must take its course after Andrew arrest. And this particular photograph from a Reuters snapper of Andrew looking absolutely dreadful, looking totally shell-shocked after leaving Aylsham police station in the back of a car last night. He has been released under investigation. That's sort of the version these days of what used to be called police bail, where they say, look, we're not actually charging you just yet, but you're still a suspect. So he has been arrested, and I mean, he looks dreadful. I have absolutely no sympathy for him whatsoever. The people I do have sympathy for are the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and those who would have an emotional reaction to this. And I wanted to talk about this with Lucy Beresford, the broadcaster and psychotherapist who's with me now. Lucy, everybody has an opinion on this. Everyone is reacting to this in some way. Some people think we shouldn't even be talking about it because it's not news. Most of the world's media would disagree with that. But there are people at the centre of this. I don't want to dwell too much on Andrew's mental health. I don't wish him bad mental health at all. I'm sure this hasn't been a nice experience for him, but I'm afraid my sympathy is limited. What about those who will be seeing this perhaps from afar, perhaps from right around the world, in Australia, Lucy, and their reactions to it?
Well, I think we have to recognise that this is a story that has had many different angles to it. And one of those is that the Epstein files story in general has been a story of abuse of power. Now, whether we're talking about financial abuse or sexual abuse, and we have to stress that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor himself has declared that he has done nothing wrong. At the same time, there are people who have been caught up in this story who one might describe as victims. I hope in a way that they wouldn't see themselves as victims, but nevertheless, they have been affected by this story. And therefore, to see Andrew Mountbatten Windsor arrested and to see the fallout of that, which is what that front page photograph has been depicting, a man slumped in the back of a car, looking quite shell-shocked, without any dignity, without any of the trappings of the life that he used to have. For many people affected by this wider story, that will feel very karmic. There will be a sense that actually justice might be about to be done, that they are being listened to and heard in a way that for years, maybe even decades, they had not felt heard and listened to. And that is one of the really damaging things about being in a situation where you are on the receiving end of abuse. It's very hard to feel that people believe you or that they understand you or that they have any compassion for your situation. So today, I think there are a lot of people who will look at that image and feel a sense of relief that actually something is happening, something is changing, and victims are now being heard.
And when you hear, for example, those interviews with Virginia Giuffre's family, they talked about sort of whooping and cheering and feeling that at last, as you intimate there, Lucy, perhaps some form of justice may be coming. But actually, this is an arrest and no charges yet. And as you say, Andrew says he's done nothing wrong to do with his role as a trade envoy. So this isn't actually, it's related in that it's related to Jeffrey Epstein, but it's not necessarily related to the allegations, which Andrew denies, about women and girls. What we do know is, of course, that you know, hypothetically might be coming down the track. This might just be the start of it. The other thing, I suppose, is that justice takes a long time in this country. The CPS not even involved yet because the police are just putting together the evidence at the moment. What about the length of time, especially when some of what Andrew is accused of, even when it comes to the trade envoy rule, is 15 years ago?
Well, justice delayed is often regarded as justice denied, and that is what is so devastating about, for example, the current situation of the courts in this country. There are so many crimes that are not seeking a resolution, and the victims don't get any sense of closure. But that's why yesterday's events were so important. They were important on so many levels. Constitutionally, they were important legally, but they're also important psychologically, because if there's one thing that human beings are hyper-vigilant for, it's around issues to do with fairness. And if you have been the victim of a crime, if you have been a victim of some form of abuse of power, it doesn't really matter what that form took. When you can see that somehow people who have perhaps been able to get away with things in the past are now perhaps not getting away with things in the present, that can be a hugely therapeutic moment. It can feel very cathartic. And therefore, it almost doesn't matter whether you were affected by that crime. And even if there were no crimes necessarily specifically slated against a particular individual, the idea that the tectonic plates are now shifting in the favour of the people who hideously, for decades, have not been listened to. They have not been heard. There were rumours, there were whispers, there were attempts to try to get these stories out there in the public domain. But now that those Epstein files have been released, there is an attempt that the balance can be redressed, and that sense of fairness is very, very powerful.
Lucy, just before you go, I wonder, I've been asking the question, and in fairness, some of our viewers and listeners have responded, and maybe more will, in regard to Queen Elizabeth II. Now, we revered her, and many people had a very emotional response to her, including her death. I covered it, I saw that, I heard what people said. I know from my personal experience in my life just how incredibly important she was as a symbol of the nation. If her reputation is tarnished by this affair, if she was shown to have willfully covered things up, she can't defend herself now, of course, because she is no longer with us. What effect do you think that would have on the nation?
What effect it will have on her, on
the nation, on people's emotional attachment to the monarchy and her as a person, if she is shown to have perhaps done things that she shouldn't have in regard to Andrew?
I think if this story had come out of the blue yesterday and nobody had known anything about it before, there hadn't been an Emily Maitlis-inspired interview, there hadn't been stories in the press, we didn't even know about Jeffrey Epstein, this would be a complete bombshell with regard to the nation's attachment to our dear beloved Queen, who died only 2 or 3 years ago. But actually, even when she was alive, and I'm thinking, for example, at the funeral of, at the sort of memorial for Prince Philip, there was a moment where she was escorted down the aisle by Andrew, which I gather constitutionally wasn't necessarily the person that everybody thought she would be escorted down the aisle by. But she had obviously decided to make a really public decision to say, I am standing by my third child. And there were questions raised at the time that this isn't something that the nation was unaware of. People knew that she, in a way, had a blind spot. They have come to learn that she contributed perhaps the bulk of the £12 million that was paid to Virginia Giuffre for whatever reason. So I don't think it will tarnish her legacy so much because it's almost priced in. We
know about a lot of it
soft spot
before. Lucy, thank you. Lucy Beresford, broadcaster and psychotherapist. I want to go to Daniel Britton now, a constitutional historian. He knows all about Parliament. He knows all about the royal family and the constitutional aspects there. Daniel, just paint a picture of us. What does it mean when the eighth in line to the throne is actually being investigated, has been arrested here? He's been removed as a councillor of state, but he's still in the line of succession. It's unlikely that 7 people will meet their maker and Andrew will become king of this country. But what is the constitutional position in all of this?
The constitutional position is that he is 8th in line to the throne. He is still a councillor of state. And he is actually, although most people don't realise this, he is actually still Duke of York. That title can only be removed by Parliament, and no act has been put before Parliament to remove that title. He was taken off the peerage roll. He was asked not to use it. He had his HRH taken away. But the Duke of York is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
Similarly to how Camilla was, of course, Princess of Wales, but didn't use the title because of Diana. That's correct, isn't it, Daniel?
It's absolutely correct. But Parliament has legislated on all these matters in the past. Edward VIII in 1936, when he abdicated, the Act of Parliament said that the throne would not go either to him or his successors. So if he had had an eldest son, for example, he would not have been allowed to succeed as king. Parliament has 2 or 3 times chosen who it wants as king. William III was chosen by Parliament. George I was chosen by Parliament. George VI was chosen by Parliament. Parliament can legislate, and Parliament will be very tempted to want to legislate that he is removed from the line of succession and as a councillor of state. Oddly, one of the very first acts of Charles's reign was about councillors of state promoting Princess Anne. But what people noticed was 2 people were not removed, Prince Andrew and Prince Harry, and were baffled while they were still there.
Interesting that you could, in theory, have Charles at the next King's speech talking about legislation his government may introduce to do with his brother, to do with Andrew. That could hypothetically happen in a few months' time when there's the state opening.
Well, you're absolutely right, Peter. It might be rather tempting for the king to use that as a public opportunity if it was the policy of the government, because as of course you know, the king's speech is of government's plans. Maybe the government might at that point be interested in an act in the new session of Parliament depriving Andrew of an act of succession and indeed a councillor of state and indeed being Duke of York, or it might be a wider act looking at peers in general or other people who've misbehaved in Parliament. That's, I think, very often the worry of the royal family is that the issue as debated in Parliament goes much, much wider than the main point that they're after. And that's what the royal family always appears to be terrified about.
matters of transparency, for example. Parliamentarians might want to enact something about transparency in finances. Once you start getting bills in Parliament and acts in Parliament, then you don't know what parliamentarians might decide they want to see in it.
Very interesting points there, Daniel. Thank you to Daniel Britton, the constitutional and parliamentary historian. We're going to talk about the role of money and what the transparency and what the royal family tell us and what they don't with Norman Baker, who's written a couple of books about this. Actually, he's a former government minister, former Liberal Democrat minister, and he's going to talk to us a little bit later. But due to popular demand, we will be talking about aliens next. Daniel rang in about it, not Daniel Britton, another Daniel rang in about it earlier on. And another Daniel has been in touch saying, ooh, let's have lots more on aliens. And this is because Donald Trump has said that, well, we'll see exactly what he said. He's reacted to what President Obama, one of his predecessors, has said on aliens, that they apparently are a thing. We'll talk to Andy Lound about this in a second. Never let it be said that we don't react to public demand. Stay with us here on Talk.
We genuinely are on resignation watch. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Labour MPs, they say, listen, Keir, your position is untenable. This is all about appointing that rat, Peter Mandelson, who faces a criminal investigation.
Can Keir Starmer survive the Mandelson scandal? We have breaking news for you. We've just been talking about, of course, Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff. We've now had another resignation from Number 10. And Keir Starmer's Director of Communications, Tim Allen, has now also resigned. The plot is thick.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Jason in the Lake District, one of the many people who's been urging me to talk about aliens. That's what we're going to do. Jason says, you're going to talk about aliens, thank goodness. Proof the Cardi P show is literally out of this world. Thank you, Jason. Well, this is not just because we want to talk about aliens. This is because two very powerful people, the President of the United States and one of his predecessors, President Obama, have been talking about this. Let's see what Obama's been saying.
Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility, unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the President of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens, indeed? Well, Donald Trump has reacted to what President Obama has said.
Barack Obama said that aliens are real. Have you seen any evidence of non-human visitors to Earth?
Well, he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. You know?
So aliens are real?
Well, I don't know if they're real or not. I can tell you he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. Well, he made a big mistake. He took it out of classified information. No, I don't have an opinion on it. I never talk about it. A lot of people do. A lot of people believe it. Do you believe it, Peter?
Well, the president can declassify anything that he wants to.
Well,
So if
maybe
you
I'll
want
get
to
him
make
out
an
of trouble.
announcement,
I may get him out of trouble by declassifying.
we know illegal aliens, really.
Yeah, illegal. Only illegals.
That's absolutely extraordinary. Wow. Okay, Andy Lound is a space expert and joins me now. Andy, two presidents talking about this. Is it about time? And did Obama let the mask slip on this? Should he have?
It'd be interesting to know. Obama has a habit, and always did as a president, of making comments as if he had this great knowledge on any subject, even though he didn't. And I think this is one where he may have just simply misspoke and said, oh, yes, aliens are real. He's corrected himself a bit later, I noticed, and pointing out, oh, well, statistically, aliens must exist. So he simply made probably a flippant comment. And looking at the body language and the smirk on President Trump's face, you could see him finding it quite amusing. Having said that, Trump has then released a statement pointing out he's going to ask that all the files relating to UFOs, extraterrestrial investigations, such like now be released, which people have been asking for 50 years, which is quite interesting. That's going to rattle some cages.
Would you welcome that, Andy? Do you think there's intelligent life out there?
Oh, I think there is intelligent life somewhere in space. I think so. But that's a statistical issue rather than anything. I'm not quite sure there's any evidence at all that they actually visited this planet. Having said this, it's quite interesting that President Clinton sent his aides down to Area 51 in order to find out if there was any extraterrestrial material there. And he actually stated there wasn't. But it was also quite clear that he said he wasn't going to be told all the information because it was on a need-to-know basis. And it was this kind of information that all presidents didn't need to know. It's thought that Richard Nixon, for instance, knew of some extraterrestrial activity and he was briefed on it, and there's some interesting documentation supporting that, which is quite fascinating. So it goes back at this a long way with all different presidents. So I think it's quite exciting to put it into the public domain. I think Trump will like this one because, oh, good, we can do another big release of information and divert people's attentions away from other things. That might be what his aides are saying. Well, this is quite good because the public are interested in this. But it is something people have been asking for a long time. And there have been interesting sightings and the military have been investigating it. And it would be nice just to have a look at it. And even if it is incursions, say, by spy balloons, or material like that, we still would like to know. Plus, from a scientific point of view, there could be some interesting natural phenomena that were simply missing because people are sort of poo-pooing things, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think we could do with the scientific data. So I think it's great. And look at the interest it's actually stirred amongst the public and people like that, which is great. It puts people focused on UFOs, the possibility of life out there in space, and using science to deal with these issues rather than fringe groups.
What is Area 51? I mean, a lot of people will have some familiarity with it, but just explain what that is and why there's such a fascination with it over the years.
Yeah, Area 51 is one of the areas which is sealed off by the United States military for use for their own purposes. Weapons testing, and in particular case Area 51, which has been declassified to tell us what's being done there, is aircraft testing. They test new designs of aeroplanes and aircraft. All the stealth aircraft were tested from Area 51. You've got Groom Dry Lake, which is a dry lake, which is ideal for as a huge runway area. So they can test new types of technology in aviation, which is what the area is simply used for. And of course, it has to be secure because you don't want foreign powers seeing what you're actually experimenting with and what you're doing. So it's used also, interesting enough, I think, from evidence I have seen, that the British have tested out some of their interesting designs out there as well at one time for evaluation purposes, for instance, Harrier jump jets, things like that, and later aircraft, just to see how they work. And it's a good place where they can be secure. So it would be an ideal place, for instance, to put extraterrestrial technology if it arrived, because it's sealed off. But Area 51, by its designation 51, is not the only area of the United States which is sealed off where they can actually do military activities. And in legend, it said that Area 51 was where the eventual wreckage from Roswell, which is where a UFO is supposed to have crashed in 1947, the wreckage of that was actually taken to Area 51. It's quite likely that an experimental aircraft or something that they weren't supposed to, the public aren't supposed to know about, crashed, and then it would be taken to Area 51 naturally for evaluation.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Andy, and I do wonder what you think the UK government should do. If the Americans do declassify some of this material or more of this material, I do wonder what you make of whether the British would follow suit. It's certainly not a priority for this government anyway.
Well, the British government is quite an interesting one in this over the years. In fact, there were the famous hoax in the 1960s, of course, where a group of students actually built some very, very good-looking small UFO flying saucers and actually distribute them in a straight line across Britain with some batteries and a beeper inside it to see how the British government would react. Incredibly, it's well worth researching it because it's an absolute farce. One of the UFOs was picked up apart on a police sergeant's desk for a bit of fun. Somebody kicked it, broke it, and some fluid poured out of it, which one expert then went in, put his finger in the fluid and tasted it to see what it was like. It was absolute farce, to be quite honest.
Okay.
So I don't think we've got a conspiracy theory here. I don't think they're capable of doing it.
I was a young reporter on BBC Radio Derby back in the day, about 15 or 16 years ago, and there was a particular pub in, I think it was in Derbyshire or East Staffordshire, I think it was in Derbyshire, if I remember correctly, and I had to do a live report, and they had seen numerous UFOs, according to the landlord, who was quite a character, and they also separately held a hen racing competition every year where they raced hens and people put bets on them. And I said to the owner as I was interviewing him, I said, do you ever worry that aliens will land just as the hen racing is happening and sort of interfere with the hen racing? And I said, you know what, no one's ever asked me that question before. So there we are. That was an interesting BBC local radio at its best. Andy, thank you as always. Andy Lound there, space expert. What do you think? Do you think there's intelligent life out there? Thank you. On Andrew, Elise has been in touch from Chelmsford and said the only aliens we have currently occupy number 10. She also says the late Queen had 4 children, Anne, Charles, Andrew and Edward. It's often said she regarded Andrew as her favourite, but I, as a parent, cannot fathom how any parent could have a favourite. Could this favouritism have led to Andrew's downfall? Nobody should be placed on a pedestal because no one is perfect, even our late Queen, it seems. She also says, I hope you've managed to avoid the Diet Cokes. I have. It's day 3 of Lent and no Diet Coke has passed my lips. Neil is in Buckinghamshire and wants to talk about Andrew. Neil, you're very welcome and thank you for ringing 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say?
Well, it's about the Andrew thing and Charles. If my brother had done what Andrew has allegedly done, I wouldn't be putting him up in luxury in Sandringham. I'd kick him out and say, you fend for yourself. So Charles has got a little bit of to answer here because he's protecting his brother. So he hasn't really kicked him out of the family. He might have taken his titles, but he hasn't kicked him out of the family. So I think Charles has got some real questions to answer. Is the danger in Charles's mind, though, not that if he cuts Andrew loose, he will take money from whoever will give him money? Desperate people do desperate things. Surely he's protecting himself to some degree. So basically, he's putting himself. Charles is putting himself forward in case what Andrew then tells what Charles knows. So he's not got the country's best interests at heart. He's thinking about himself. So he's just like his brother in a sense.
Very interesting, Neil. Thank you for that. That's Neil in Buckinghamshire. Give me a ring at 0344 499 1000. If you want to get your voice on the air between now and 1 o'clock, please do ring that number. Send me a voice note on the same number as well, 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk more about Iran. I don't think enough people are talking about Iran. The fact that we could be on the brink of a major bombing campaign there. What does it mean for Israel? What does it mean for us here in the UK? And how do we, sitting here in the UK, most of us, some are listening and watching elsewhere, but how do we support the people of Iran, the ordinary people who are attempting to rise up against this dreadful, horrible regime? Could our government do more in all of this? We'll talk more about Andrew too as well with Norman Baker, who's the author of And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. It has been a dramatic 36 hours here in the UK, given that Andrew, the 8th in line to the throne, has been arrested. But there are many other stories as well. Whatever you want to talk to me about, maybe it's aliens, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mark Dolan is back tomorrow from 6 here on Talk. He'll be here tomorrow and Sunday for Talk Breakfast between 6 and 10. And I'm here for the mid-morning shows tomorrow, Saturday, and on Sunday between 10 and 1. We're going to have some top guests, some great discussion during those programmes. Next week, a little bit different for me, I'm going to be on the evening shows between 7 and 10, Monday to Thursday. So I'll be with you between 7 and 10 on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, and then next weekend as usual, Saturday and Sunday. I want to talk now about Iran. Catherine Perez Shaktam will be with me in a second, the Middle East expert, I should say. There have been a couple of very interesting things said by world leaders. One of them is Donald Trump. One of them is Yvette Cooper. Let's go to what Donald Trump has been saying, warning Iran about possible military strikes in a very short period of time, maybe even less than 2 weeks' time. Let's see what the president's been saying.
What is the goal if there is a U.S. military
Well, we'll
strike?
either make a deal or we're going to get a deal one way or the other.
But when the military strike, is it to wipe out their nuclear?
I'm not going to talk to you about that, but we're either going to get a deal or it's going to be unfortunate for them.
And he said to make Peter, please, give them a deadline firm to make a deal.
I would think that would be enough time, 10, 15 days, pretty much maximum.
Donald Trump there speaking on Air Force One. Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, our Foreign Secretary here in the UK, she's been reacting to these reports that the UK has told the US they cannot use RAF bases for strikes on Iran. She didn't quite address it head on, but it's interesting to hear what she said and the contrasting attitude to Iran. She thinks it can be done through diplomacy. I would respectfully suggest, Yvette, that hasn't worked so far. This is what the Foreign Secretary has said.
The UK and the US have a long, deep security partnership. We work immensely closely. And on the issue of Iran, that is why we're supporting the US talks taking place with Iran, because frankly, the Iranian regime has continued to pose a security threat, has continued to pursue nuclear weapons, and that is why we've supported sanctions and also to increase diplomatic and economic pressure on the regime. That's what we believe is the right thing to do.
Yvette Cooper, they're increasing diplomatic pressure. Will that work? Well, Catherine Perez Shaktam is a Middle East expert and is with me now. Catherine, greater diplomatic pressure on Iran that could bring an end to this impasse in the view of the UK Foreign Secretary. What do you think?
No, I think, look, I think it would be foolish of us at this point in time to expect Iran to do anything other than what it has done in the past, which is to wait around, promise many things and do nothing, and in the end increase the threat that they pose to Britain, to the British people, and to the rest of the world. I'd like to also remind viewers that we have 90 million people facing death potentially for disagreeing with the Ayatollah. So if we truly on the side of democracy and human rights and all those beautiful values that we claim to support, I think it would be healthy to consider the military option on the basis that
it's really weird. It's really weird, Catherine, isn't it, how there are so many pro-Palestinian activists, so many people going out on those marches in London every Saturday or every second Saturday saying they care about human rights and women's rights, yet so many of them are not to be found when it comes to the people of Iran because they're an opponent of because they're of course an opponent of Israel.
Exactly. Look, Iran, the Islamic regime is a theocratic regime that is a war with God, with the rest of the world, with the West, and will not stop. I mean, their ideology is geared towards experts. I'm not the first one to say it. I certainly won't be the last. And until we realize, and we need to do that really quickly, yesterday would have been a great date to do that, is that they won't stop. So it's either the case that we make them because they are the bully in the playground. So we need to have an adult in the room. Unfortunately for us, Keir Starmer is unwilling to take that role, and Donald Trump, the president of the US, is willing to step up. Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel is also willing to step up with great other many people. We need to do what is necessary and to stop thinking that leadership requires us to argue for peace. Peace is not the absence of war. And in this case, in order to get peace for the Iranian people and protect women, children, and a future that could be ours, unless we realize that they are doing the same thing here in the UK, trying to transform this country into yet another theocracy, we are in trouble. So I would advise people to defend what is theirs, because right now it is still there. It is still ours.
And when you hear from Yvette Cooper, and when you hear that perhaps these military bases in the UK are not going to be used. I mean, look, the Americans have lots of other options, but it does put the UK in, I think, a very bad moral position when it comes to what's happening in Iran.
I agree with you. How can you defend, Britain's position in that we are the so-called defenders of human rights if we're not willing to step up to the plate and defend not only the Iranian diaspora here at home, where they're getting beaten up by the regime and the regime's stooges, and allow them to be murdered in Iran? How can we position ourselves as anything other than peddling to an ideology that is despicable? And look, Iran has posed a threat to the UK, not just to the Iranian diaspora, but to British people here, national.
Absolutely, and we've seen attacks. We've seen attacks on our streets. We've seen people stabbed by the Iranian regime.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I would say it's time to do something about it. Look, diplomacy can only go so far. In this case, they are not interested. What they're interested in doing is wasting our time so they could consolidate their position here in the UK by way of the Islamic centers and mosques and other organizations. So it's time for us to, bite the bullet and actually decide what is it that we want to do, defend our democracy or peddle to radicalism. The question is very clear.
Catherine, thank you. And you've posed that very, very clearly indeed. Catherine Perez-Shakdam, who is a Middle East expert. What do you think of what she said? Still plenty of time for calls between now and the end of the programme. 0344 499 1000. Daryl says, I'm sure Charles would happily kick Andrew out and see him in a semi in Peckham with a job as a forklift driver. But realistically, Andrew has to be given a degree of protection from himself, if nothing else. Completely agree with you there. The British government is full of spacemen as it is, says Stephen in Belfast. Rob says, aliens, we've got a government full of them. Marion says, funny how we always look outwards for intelligent life. Wales has a rich history of UFO sightings with significant activity concentrated in the 1970s Broadhaven Triangle and the 1974 Roswelsh Berwyn, is that how you pronounce it? Berwyn Mountains incident. That is Marion in Ludlow there. Good Welsh name there. David says, hi Team Alien. David's here. Well, of course, other intelligent life forms exist in the universe, probably on another third planet from a local star, their sun, unfolding in a different way to man on Earth. If they are further unfolded in understanding, then we will discover us. If we are further unfolded, then we shall discover them. We are light years away from planets colonising us, as we cannot yet bring peace on our Earth, and yet still to understand fully seven senses God given to man, because there's no fin being spooky do, says David. Well, thanks for that, David. Lots in that. Pat has been in touch, 0344 499 1000. Pat, your thought on aliens?
Well, the fact is that up till 1992, the US government denied any knowledge or that there was any Area 51 in Nevada, and it wasn't on any map of the area, but it was there. Now, who's to know what's beneath the ground now? Because that's been in operation since the 1950s, is Area 51. But they only declassified it in 1992 or 93. Now, I've got a theory that they could be some kind of civilization that sort of lives on this planet with us, but not. But like maybe
what makes you think that, Pat?
But beneath our deepest oceans.
Why do you think that, Pat?
Well, because there's been lots of lights going on just underneath the water, especially around just off of California, Catalina Island, and the US Nimitz battle group. I think in 2004 they saw tic-tac.
You're really into this, Pat. You've done your reading around this.
No, it's because it's a fascinating subject.
Okay. All right.
And I can't tell you where they come from, who they are.
And what do you think, just before you go, Pat, what do you think about Obama and Trump talking about this now, especially Obama?
Well, there's been talk of it for many years, for a few years, been congressional.
But it hasn't usually had presidents or ex-presidents talking about it, has it?
Well, the last president that had any wouldn't I say contact, but any knowledge or any brief of aliens was Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Yeah, the general himself. Pat, very interesting.
Maybe JFK.
Pat, listen, thanks for that. Appreciate that. Lots to chew over with what Pat's saying. Lots more on Andrew as well. Lots of people want to get in. We'll take as many calls as we can between now and 1 o'clock. We'll also speak to Norman Baker, author of And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. We'll talk about specifically that role as a trade envoy. Lots to discuss in just a minute here on Talk. Stay with us.
Good morning to you. This is Toward the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. Not just that the police have arrived at the Sandringham estate where Prince Andrew, as was now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is currently living since being thrown out of the Windsor estate. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation. And certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files as released in the last few weeks. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks everybody who's been in touch, including Clayton in Dartford, who says, please stop reminding us of Ed Cooper as our Foreign Secretary. We're all depressed enough as it is. And lots on aliens as well, one person says. Without a doubt, objects are seen in our skies and seem to have exotic propulsion systems. If there is not extraterrestrial life, can you imagine how this technology would improve the life of everyone on the planet? If they're man-made, then whoever has them should be arrested. Gary in Bolden echoes the thoughts of many other people, saying there may be intelligent life out there, but we have no signs of intelligent life in number 10. Another person says, so everyone knows what President Trump is like. He boasts about stopping wars, so imagine being the first man to tell the world's population that we're not alone. It doesn't get any bigger than this. Trump will be that person, and it's coming soon. Matt's been in touch on Andrew, what we're going to talk about next with Norman Baker. We're just getting him on the line at the moment. And Matt has said, I think the Queen remains much loved and would be forgiven in memoriam. No one has ever liked Andrew for a quarter of a century. I also think that unless there is damning evidence against security guards, footmen, servants, most folk will see how impossible their position might be and would be inclined to show them some understanding. But there has to be clear evidence. We must do the right thing. And where there is clear evidence, we must do the right thing as quickly as possible. Well, Norman Baker is a former Liberal Democrat minister. He's also author of And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. Norman, it's great to talk to you. And I wonder if we can get into a little bit about Andrew's role as a trade envoy, because I know you have some thoughts about this. And I know at the time when you were in government as a Liberal Democrat minister, you were someone who did not think that he should have that role. Just bring me some of the background, some of the thinking around that time and what your role in that was.
Well, it goes back even further than that. It goes back to when I was in opposition 20 years ago, when I was asking questions of the business department about his particular activities. Because at that point, even then, it was clear that he was undertaking flights at vast of public purse on private jets and first-class five-star hotels all around the world. and deciding his own criteria, his own destination. So he wasn't sent by the government. He was just going himself and billing the taxpayer.
It certainly seemed to be the case, Norman, and you exposed a lot of this, that he would add a few days on at the end or whatever. Also, Paul Scully, who was a Conservative minister, I was talking to him last night, actually, and he was talking about how Andrew often wouldn't stay in the embassy, and sometimes, on one occasion, I think in Thailand, booked out the entire floor of a very expensive hotel so he could stay there rather than in the embassy, which would be the normal place for him to stay.
Yeah, and free of charge. And it wasn't just that. If you look at the where he was going and where he was going, there's a high correlation between where he was going at taxpayers' expense and the availability of very prestigious golf clubs, which is, of course, what he liked to do, play golf. But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just a waste of public money. It was also where he was going and how long he was spending there and why he was going. And there was a high number of visits he made to pretty despotic countries, the ones where they respected the British royal family and would have given him, out of courtesy, gifts to thank him for coming. You know, why would he go, for example, to Qatar 9 times in 6.5 years? What possible interest of the British state can be generated by that level of visits? And the same thing applies to other Middle Eastern countries. You know, his trade envoy role, you would think he might be going to somewhere like democratic countries where there was some interest in trading with Britain. But no, I think he was going to countries, Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, where trade was going to be minimal with the UK. So he was not actually batting for Britain, he was batting for himself.
So what needs to happen here? Because he's been arrested for, and he's continues to be a suspect, but hasn't been charged on suspicion of misconduct in public office. That's quite a difficult thing to prove. It's a complex thing. What do you think should happen now, specifically regarding the trade envoy rule, but also in regard to the other allegations which he denies?
Well, I mean, look, the reason the police have arrested him, in my view, rather than interview him under caution, which was the alternative, is because if they arrest him, that gives them the right to have a warrant to search his properties. So what they're clearly going to do, or are doing, is going through his properties, looking at his paperwork, looking at his computers, and seeing what evidence there is. And out of that will come either a decision to refer the matter to the Director of Public Prosecutions or not. My guess is, based on what I've seen myself, that there is evidence there of the offence having been committed. And indeed, the similar allegations, of course, were made against Peter Mandelson, as you will know, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So that needs to be tied up. I mean, after it's 20 years too late. Some of these people like me were making these points 20 years ago. And it's taken a very long time for the police to take any action.
Well, what do you think that says about? What do you think that says about the police, Norman? And what do you think it says, perhaps, about the monarchy as well? Because I've been asking the question all morning whether we need to reevaluate our thoughts about senior royals, maybe about Charles, and maybe even about Queen Elizabeth II as well.
We do. Well, first of all, as far as the police were concerned, they've never ever investigated properly any allegation made against any member of the royal family, and there's been some allegations made which have been pretty cut and dried. I mean, for example, here's a small example. Andrew himself, when he couldn't get into his property by the direct route in Windsor Great Park, slammed down the gate, caused tens of thousands of pounds of damage by ramming his Range Rover through the gate. Well, anyone else would have done that. It would have been criminal damage. Can you imagine the Extinction Rebellion doing that and the police doing nothing about that? No, they'd been arrested. Andrew wasn't. That's just one small example of many over the years.
Look, this is sort of by the by, but I'm just giving an example of a time where a royal was prosecuted. Princess Anne was prosecuted in 2002 and fined and ordered to take training because her dog mauled somebody. I mean, that was criminal action taken against a member of the royal family. So it's not as if they've all been above the law all the time.
No, that's true, but that's the exception rather than the rule. But you're right to draw attention to it. As far as the royal family is concerned, you have to ask yourself how much was known by the Queen at the time and by Prince Charles, as he then was, and other members of the royal family about what Andrew was doing, both in terms of his appalling use of taxpayers' money, his dodgy trips abroad, and, of course, the allegations which have been made by others about his association with Epstein. What action did he take when the photograph appeared of Epstein and Andrew together in Central Park? What action did he take when the photograph appeared of Andrew with his arm around Virginia Giuffre? The answer appears to be nothing. And the royal family's approach has been to say nothing and pretend it's all going to be smoothed over and they'll be immune from it. When that doesn't work, the next strategy is to say, this is Andrew, nothing to do with us. And I'm afraid that doesn't wash. And the King's statement yesterday was very welcome, but it's 15 years too late.
Okay, Norman, thank you. Norman Baker there. He's an author of a book called And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. Ian Collins is, of course, coming up in a few minutes' time. We'll talk to him. But in the meantime, I just want to talk to a few callers. Janice is in Wakefield in West Yorkshire. Janice, what do you think of this Andrew story?
Well, the gentleman just been on really and said all I wanted to say, really. I have the same feelings about everything. But before I go, I just want to tell you that when I was a very, very small girl, and I'm not a small girl anymore, I'm an oldish lady, I saw a UFO quite clearly.
Oh, right, okay.
It has nothing to do with the subject about Prince Andrew.
No. Well, we're talking about UFOs as well. And did you see it in Yorkshire?
School. I was on my way home from school. My school was situated in a park. I lived in Leeds then, and with a friend. And we looked up and we saw this disc in the sky with red lights all around it. We had no idea what it was. We just looked at it and watched it for ages and ages. And it was just spinning in the sky, really high up. And then it just shot off out of sight. And I never forgot it. When I got home, I drew a picture of it for my parents. So I was so shocked by what I'd seen. I've never seen one since. So
wow, okay. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. Janice, sorry. Don't cut Janice off. Sorry, she's just a final point to make. Go on ahead, Janice.
No, it's not about Prince Andrew. I feel a bit of compassion for him. I think he's been a very spoilt brat all his life. He doesn't know right from wrong, unfortunately, even though the Queen was head of the Church of England.
But he's responsible for his own actions, isn't he?
He's responsible for his own actions. He's a grown man, and he had daughters as well, which is despicable, really, when he got his own daughters.
Of course, he denies all the allegations against him. But Janice, listen, thank you for your thoughts on Andrew and UFOs. Didn't think those two would be part of the same call, but there you are. That's the beauty of talk. Caroline is in London and has some thoughts on corruption. Caroline, you're very welcome to the programme.
Oh, hi, Peter. Amazing show as always.
Thank you.
I know we haven't got much time. I just want to say that I listen to talk all the time, and every single day, there's another thing about corruption. You know, when you mentioned about, what was it, 15 million with the immigrants that
yeah,
we pay out?
I mean, I think it just comes down to the key point that is at the heart of not every story, but so many stories we do on this programme and on this station, Caroline, which is just about straightforwardly fairness. Just about fairness. Absolutely. Is it fair? Does it? You know, people who work hard, people who do who contribute to our society in some way, does it actually benefit them, or is it actually difficult for them, Caroline?
But what I want to also say, you know, there's an investigation now into Sadiq Khan with all the money he's been getting, and then you've got, you know, we've got a.
Well, I just want to be clear and keep us both on the right side of the law, Caroline. There's no suggestion. There's no suggestion Sadiq Khan's done anything wrong. Okay.
It's an allegation, okay. But you know, we could talk all day about it, and then we've got the government investigating their corruption. I mean, the corruption it doesn't even touch the surface. And all of us who are working, I'm not working, by the way. I can't find a job. I've never been unemployed in my life, and my business went after COVID.
I'm sorry to hear that, Caroline. You're looking for something new?
I am. I am, and I was on universal credit for 8 months, and I came off it because it's not how I was brought up. I didn't want to do it. It was very unhelpful. And do you know what, Peter? The only way I could get off of it was by telling them I was going abroad. They wouldn't let me come off of it.
Why did you want to come off universal credit, Caroline?
Because they weren't going to help. They do not find you a job. They do not help you. You know, it was a waste of time. It made me really depressed. And I thought, you know, I'm an educator, but I will find my own job for the tiny bit of money I want. I don't want to take from this. It's not how I was brought up. But the fact that I couldn't even get off of it, that really opened my eyes to what really is
Caroline,
going on here.
We're short on time, but I'd love to talk to you more about that at some stage in the future. Maybe give me a ring over the weekend. I'm on Saturday and tomorrow and Sunday.
100%.
Thank you, Caroline. Between 10 and 1, we'll maybe speak more to Caroline about that, because it's fascinating, and it's also very upsetting when people are treated in certain ways. And Caroline, I'm sure, wants to work, and there's so many people who do, including many young people as well. Lots to discuss on Saturday and Sunday between 10 and 1. Ian Collins is with me now. He's on the other side of the news. How are you doing, Ian?
All right. You did talk about the aliens, didn't you?
We did, yeah.
Yeah. And any evidence?
Any evidence of life in Uranus?
You went there, didn't you?
It did. Well, yeah, in a sense.
Yep, metaphorically speaking, ish. So the whole the whole issue of people.
The handovers with Kevin O'Sullivan are very different. Let me tell you.
I could say the same. The whole thing about the alien thing, it's a bit like the people in Ghost. There's no one has ever got that glossy 6x4 photo.
Yeah.
Okay. This is me. We went to America. We went to the desert in Arizona, and here is me with an alien. Or, when people claim they've been taken by aliens, flown around and then experimented on. And no one's ever got the crystal clear photo. The UFO stuff, it's all a bit grainy, isn't it? We've got great capabilities now.
That's right.
No one, as far as I know, has ever taken that money shot moment of the alien.
Presumably, you could just do sonar on the old, Loch Ness. You could scan the whole
It's
area.
another one, that Nessie merchant. I mean, what's she about?
I spoke to
very old by now.
I spoke to a Loch Ness person who sells little Nessies, and he said, if you find, I said, how do you know it looks like the Loch Ness monster? He said, if you get a picture of the Loch Ness monster and it doesn't look like that,